Boshlayveramiz. Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli bugungi konferensiyamiz qatnashchilari. Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. Bugun mana 2020-yilning inson kamoloti hisoboti, ya'ni inson taraqqiyoti hisobotini O'zbekiston Respublikasidagi taqdimotiga yig'ilgan ekanmiz. Demak, bu taqdimotni boshlashdan oldin bir narsani aytib o'tmoqchi edimki, barchamizga ma'lumki, inson rivojlanishining barometrlaridan biri bo'lgan bu hisobot, ya'ni 30 yildan beri chop qilinib kelinadi. Mana xabarlaringiz bo'lsa, bizda ham mana 2014-yilda oxirgi marta o'sha inson taraqqiyoti hisoboti, ya'ni oxirgisi, eslasam, to'g'ri eslasam, Galinakariydan o'zlari buni boshlaganlar va o'zlari davom ettirganlar. Bu oxirgisi menimcha ta'lim sohasi bo'yicha bo'lgan. Mana 30 yildirki, ushbu hisobot insoniyat rivoji faqatgina iqtisodiy o'sishdan iborat emasligi, balkim ta'lim, sog'liqni saqlash va inson hayotining sifati ham bu muhim ekanligini ko'rsatib kelmoqda. Oxirgi 30 yilda insoniyat qilgan taraqqiyoti, demak, 1 milliarddan ortiq insonlarimizni o'sha yer yuzidagi insonlarni kambag'allikdan chiqarishga erishdi. Afsuski, insoniyat taraqqiyoti o'zi bilan tengsizlik, iqlim o'zgarishi, ijtimoiy nostabillik va demokratik prinsiplarning pasayishi kabi yangi tahdid va inqirozlarni keltirib chiqarmoqda. 2020-yildan boshlab inson tarixida yangi bir normallik shakllana boshladi. Covid pandemiyasi bu yangi normallikning faqat bir boshlanishi desak xato bo'lmaydi. Va ayrim odamlar sayyoramizni qamrab olgan ko'plab inqirozlar tugashini ma'lum bir sanasi bordek, eski normallikka qaytish haqida munozaralar ham bo'lib o'tmoqda. Afsuski, ko'p hollarda insonlar tomonidan bir inqirozdan ikkinchi inqirozga o'tilganda birinchisini normallik deb hisoblash odat tusiga kirib qolgan. Eski normallikka qaytish imkoniyati mavjudmi, yo'qmi bilmaymiz, lekin unga qaytish inson taraqqiyotining rivojlanishiga emas, demak, cheksiz o'sha inqirozlar bilan qayta yana to'xtovsiz kurashishga aylanishi mumkin. 20-yilda mazkur hisobotning planetamizning ekotizimlarini shakllantirayotgan insoniyatning Anthropocene faoliyati, inson tarixida misli ko'rilmagan kuch sifatida sivilizatsiyamizning kelajagini belgilab berishini ta'kidlaydi va mamlakatimizda olib borilayotgan Orol dengizining kurashini salbiy ta'sirlarini bartaraf etish bo'yicha, demak, olib borilayotgan sa'y-harakatlar ham buning bir yaqqol misoli bo'la oladi. Bundan keyingi taraqqiyot jarayoni insoniyat rivojiga bo'lgan yondashuvni keskin o'zgarishni talab qiladi. Va insoniyat rivoji bizning hayotimiz uchun ham muhim bo'lgan sayyoramiz tizimlarini barqarorligiga tahdid solmoqda. Bundan buyon har birimiz yashash tarzimiz, bir-birimiz bilan muloqot qilishni adolatli transformatsiya qilish yo'llarini izlab topmas ekanmiz, demak, muammolarimiz ko'payib boradi. Va tabiatimizni saqlagan holda yangi ijtimoiy normalarni joriy etish orqali biz o'zimizni keyingi rivojlanish bosqichiga tayyorlashimiz lozim. Mana 2020-yilda Covid pandemiyasi insoniyat taraqqiyotiga salbiy ta'sir ko'rsatgan eng katta voqealardan desak bir xato bo'lmaydi va shunday muhitda ham O'zbekiston mana shu inson taraqqiyoti indeksida, demak, keskin o'zgarishlar qilib, demak, 4 pog'ona yuqoriga ko'tarildi. Va birinchi marta insoniyat mana shu indeks hisobot chop qilinayotganda 30 yil bo'lsa, birinchi marta mana shu indeks, demak, har bir mamlakatning taraqqiyotini, demak, atrof muhitga bo'layotgan ta'siri va sayyoramizga ko'rsatayotgan o'sha bosimlari hisobga olgan holda qaytadan hisoblab ko'rildi. O'zbekiston Respublikasi 4 pog'ona ko'tarilgani bilan, lekin o'sha sayyoramizga ko'rsatgan ta'sirini inobatga olganda biz 15 pog'ona, demak, oldinga siljidi. Va bu borada mana hozir ko'pgina, demak, fikr mulohazalar qilamiz va bu borada mana shu inson taraqqiyotining hisoboti va uni qaytadan yana jonlantirish bo'yicha O'zbekistonda qilinish kerak bo'lgan ishlar haqida ham gapirib o'tamiz va bu tadbirni asosan mana shu tashkil etishda eng muhim bo'lgan mana shu O'zbekiston Respublikasining Senati va O'zbekiston Respublikasining iqtisodiy taraqqiyot va kambag'allikni qisqartirish vazirligi, demak, va O'zbekiston Respublikasidagi Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotining taraqqiyot dasturiga biz ko'pdan ko'p minnatdorchilik bildiramiz va mana shu kechamizni ochish uchun birinchi so'zni O'zbekiston Respublikasi Senatining rahbarining birinchi o'rinbosari Sodiq Salixovich Safayevga beramiz. Marhamat.
Katta rahmat. Hurmatli senatorlar, deputatlar, hurmatli Matilda Dimovskiy xonimlar va janoblar. Ma'lumki, vatanimiz prezidenti muhtaram Shavkat Miromonovich Mirziyoyev o'zining qator chiqishlarida eng muhim masalalar qatorida barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlari va inson taraqqiyot dasturini amalga oshirish ahamiyati va bu borada parlament nazoratini kuchaytirish vazifasi haqida urg'u berib so'z yuritgan edi. Bugungi kunda har bir senator va deputatning eng dolzarb masalasi bu hukumat idoralarining ishini, shu jumladan milliy qonunlarni ijro etish va xalqaro majburiyatlarni implementatsiya qilish bilan bog'liq faoliyatini muntazam monitoring qilish va unga munosib baho berishdir. Bu borada parlament nazoratining eng muhim yo'nalishlaridan biri bu Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti barcha a'zo davlatlari va 23 ta xalqaro tashkilotlar tomonidan qabul qilingan barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlari va ular bilan uzviy bog'liq bo'lgan inson taraqqiyoti dasturi doirasidagi mamlakatimiz tomonidan o'z zimmasiga olgan majburiyatlar bajarilishini ta'minlashdir. Mamlakatimiz va butun mintaqamiz, ya'ni Markaziy Osiyo mintaqasi muammolarni inobatga olgan holda shuni e'tirof etmoq lozimki, inson taraqqiyoti dasturi o'z ichiga iqtisodiy va ijtimoiy jabhalar bilan birgalikda ekologiya yo'nalishini ham uzviy birlikda qamrab oladi. Shu bois fikrimizcha 2020-yilgi ma'ruzaning inson taraqqiyotining aynan Anthropocene nuqtai nazaridan ko'rilishi alohida tahsinga loyiqdir. Shuni ham qayd etmoq lozimki, barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlari va ular bilan uzviy bog'liq bo'lgan inson taraqqiyoti dasturi mamlakatimiz rivojlantirish bo'yicha harakatlar strategiyasi bilan to'la ham ohangdir. Parlament a'zolari inson taraqqiyoti dasturida ko'zda tutgan vazifalar bilan faol shug'ullanish ahamiyati yana shu bilan belgilanadiki, ushbu dasturlar qamrab oluvchi masalalar mamlakatimiz rivojini, kerak bo'lsa taqdirini hal qiluvchi yo'nalishlarni o'z ichiga oladi. O'zbekistonning yangilangan ichki va tashqi siyosati jamiyatimizda katta umidlarni uyg'otdi. Mavjud muammolarga qaramasdan bu siyosat yurtdoshlarimiz tomonidan qo'llab-quvvatlanmoqda va xalqaro miqyosda nihoyatda yuqori baholanyapti. Islohotlar muvaffaqiyatining hal qiluvchi sharti odamlarning bugungi kundan rozi bo'lishlaridir. Xalqimiz bugun shu kunda hayot darajasi yaxshilanishini ko'rishi kerak. So'nggi davr mobaynida mamlakatimiz rivojida ijobiy dinamika mustahkamlanmoqda. Ulkan ishlar amalga oshirildi. O'zbekistonda olib borilayotgan tub o'zgarishlar ortga qaytmas tus olmoqda. Ichki va tashqi salbiy omillarga qaramasdan makro iqtisodiy ko'rsatkichlar muttasil o'sishini ta'minlandi. Islohotlar davrida mamlakatimiz iqtisodiyot o'sishi 20% ni tashkil etyapti. Parlament boshchiligida xalqaro reyting va indekslar bilan ishlash bo'yicha respublika kengashi tashkil etildi. 24 ta xalqaro reyting va indeks, shu jumladan BMT taraqqiyot dasturining inson kamolati indeksi O'zbekiston uchun ustuvor deb qabul qilingan. Tahlil shuni ko'rsatmoqdaki, qator yo'nalishda ijobiy siljishlar qayd etilmoqda. Masalan, inson kamolati indeksining kutilayotgan umr ko'rinishi indeksi, onalar va go'daklar o'limini oldini olish va kamaytirishga sezilarli o'zgarishlarga erishildi. So'nggi 4 yilda bolalar o'limi koeffitsiyenti 15.4 dan 12.4 ga, ya'ni 3 promiliga, onalar o'limi koeffitsiyenti 21 dan 19.6 promiliga kamaydi. Daromad indeksi mamlakatimizda xarid qilish qobiliyati pariteti bo'yicha aholi jon boshiga yalpi milliy daromad miqdori 7142 AQSh dollarini tashkil etib, o'tgan yilga nisbatan 680 AQSh dollariga o'sgan. Sog'liqni saqlash yo'nalishida birlamchi tibbiy sanitariya yordami masalalarini aholi jon boshiga moliyalashtirish tizimi joriy etilmoqda. Ta'lim yo'nalishida bolalarni o'rta ta'lim bilan qamrab olish koeffitsiyenti ham ortib bormoqda. Bu borada ishlarni davom ettirishni xalqaro tashkilotlar, shu jumladan BMT tuzilmalari bilan bo'lgan hamkorligimiz nihoyatda muhimdir. Ayniqsa daromad indeksi orqali baholanuvchi kambag'allik chegarasi belgilash uslubiyoti, kambag'allikni qisqartirish konsepsiyasini ishlab chiqish, ishlarni yakunlash va unga qabul qilishni erishishda Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti va uning rivojlanish dasturi bilan hamkorlikni biz davom ettirishni kutmoqdamiz va bunga o'z qiziqishimizni yana bir bor bildiramiz. Albatta, amalga oshirilgan ishlar ro'yxati katta, lekin barchamiz yaxshi tushunamizki, hali iqtisodiy, ijtimoiy rivojlanishimizda keskin burilish haqida gapirish erta. Bu muammolarni yechishda hamjihatlik bilan barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlariga, inson taraqqiyoti dasturini bajarishni ta'minlashimiz biz uchun nihoyatda katta ahamiyat kasb etadi. Biz bugun taqdim etiladigan ma'ruzani olqishlaymiz va yana bir bor Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti va uning ixtisoslashgan institutlar bilan ham hukumat va O'zbekistonning parlamenti hamkorlikni yanada rivojlantirishga tayyorligini izhor etmoqchimiz. E'tiboringiz uchun katta rahmat.
Katta rahmat Sodiq Salihevich. Mana albatta mamlakatimiz Senati bu borada jonbozlik ko'rsatib kelmoqda va bu ishlarni mana shunaqangi yanada yuqori templarda olib borishda albatta biz yana ham sizlar tomonidan qilinayotgan sa'y-harakatlarni bundan-da ortiq bo'lishini kutib qolamiz. Rahmat sizga yana bir marta. Endi har bir iqtisodchi borki, iqtisodiy o'sish, taraqqiyot deganda birinchi o'rinda faqatgina o'sha bizning milliy boyligimiz yoki aytaylik yalpichki mahsulotimiz yoki aholi jonboshiga to'g'ri keladigan yalpichki mahsulotimizni o'sishini emas, demak ko'p o'lchamli o'sish yoki ko'p o'lchamli taraqqiyotni tushunamiz va bu ko'p o'lchamli taraqqiyotda o'sha tengsizlik deymiz, ijtimoiy iqtisodiy holat, ya'ni sog'liqni saqlash holatlari va ta'lim tizimlarini ham rivojini, taraqqiyotini ko'ramiz. Va bu borada mana shunday ko'p o'lchamli taraqqiyot jarayonida bizda mana shu hamma jarayonlarni bir muvofiqlashtirish vazifasi yuklangan bir muhim vazirlik bor. Bu vazirlik demak iqtisodiy taraqqiyot va kambag'allikni qisqartirish vazirligi. Demak bu yangi formatda o'sha yangi islohotlarga javob beradigan vazirlik. Demak bu vazirlikni bugun mana O'zbekiston Respublikasi demak iqtisodiy taraqqiyot va kambag'allikni qisqartirish vazirining birinchi o'rinbosari Ilhomjon Norqulov qatnashyaptilar va bu borada hozirgi aytganimizdek o'sha ko'p o'lchamli, ko'p qirrali demak taraqqiyot borasida O'zbekistonda qilinayotgan ishlar haqida o'zlarining fikrlarini bildiradilar. Marhamat Ilhom aka.
Rahmat. Assalomu alaykum hurmatli konferensiya ishtirokchilari, xonimlar va janoblar. Siz aziz konferensiya ishtirokchilariga, xususan ushbu konferensiyani o'tkazish tashabbuskori bo'lgan asosiy hamkorlarimizdan biri Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotining taraqqiyot dasturining O'zbekistondagi doimiy vakili Matilda Dimosga xonimni chuqur minnatdorchiligimizni izhor etmoqchiman. Fursatdan foydalanib so'zimni avvalida barchangizni, xususan BMT taraqqiyot dasturi jamoasini inson kamoloti indeksining 30 yillik yubiley hisobotini muvaffaqiyatli e'lon qilingani bilan chin yurakdan tabriklayman. Mana shu so'nggi hisobotda O'zbekiston Respublikasi 0.72 indeks bilan ko'rsatkich bilan 106-o'rinni, ya'ni 108-o'rindan 106-o'ringa 2 pog'onaga yaxshilandi. Umuman olganda agar 2010-2019 yillardagi dinamikani qaraydigan bo'lsak, umr ko'rish davomiyligi 3-4 yoshga, ya'ni 68-3 yoshdan 71-7 yoshga, o'rtacha ta'lim yillari 1-8 yilga, yalpi milliy daromadda aholi jonboshiga to'g'ri keladigan ulushi 2 barobarga, ya'ni bu o'sha xalqaro xarid qilish qobiliyati metodologiyasi bilan hisoblangan ko'rsatkich bo'yicha hisoblangan 2 barobarga oshgan. Inson kamolati indeksini agar biz metodologik va mazmunan olib qaraydigan bo'lsak, buni yaxlitlaganimizda bir 3 ta asosiy guruhda olib qarashimiz mumkin. Bu o'sha inson sog'ligi yoki umr ko'rish uzoqligi va ta'lim olish darajasi va sifati va o'z keyingi muhim bu demak guruh yoki ko'rsatkich bu daromadlar darajasi bilan demak bog'liq yoki shu ko'rsatkichlarga asoslanadi. Albatta mazkur indeksda reytingda yuqori o'ringa ega bo'lgan davlatlar bu iqtisodiyoti rivojlangan davlatlar bo'lib hisoblanadi. Tabiiyki Lekin biz boshqa bir indekslarni qarashimiz mumkin, masalan doing business va boshqa bu yerda rivojlanayotgan mamlakatlarni ham ko'rishimiz mumkin yuqori pog'onalarda. Bu narsani men nima uchun aytmoqchiman? Demak, mamlakatda aholini umuman yashash darajasi yoki insonni hayotini sifatini yaxshilanishi bevosita bu yuqorida aytib o'tilgan omillar bu ta'lim darajasi va sifati, sog'liqni saqlash sifati, xizmatlarning sifati va aholi daromadlari bilan bog'liq. Va bu boradagi qilinayotgan ishlar bir-biri bilan chambarchas bog'liq bo'lib hisoblanadi. Mamlakatimizda ham so'nggi yillarda amalga oshirilayotgan tarkibiy islohotlar mustahkam iqtisodiy o'sishga erishish va shu orqali kambag'allikni qisqartirish hamda aholining yashash sharoitini yaxshilash borasida sifatli natijalarga erishish uchun zamin yaratishga qaratilgan. Gap kambag'allikni qisqartirish haqida ketar ekan, xabaringiz bor, o'tgan yildan boshlab hurmatli prezidentimiz bu boradagi qat'iy maqsad va siyosiy irodani o'zlarining murojaatlarida ta'kidlab o'tdilar. Amaliy tomondan agar bajariladigan ishlarga qaraydigan bo'lsak, mamlakatimizda ushbu borada institutsional asoslar yaratilib, kambag'allikni qisqartirish masalalarini muvofiqlashtiruvchi vazirlik tashkil qilindi. Yuqorida Obid aka bu narsani ta'kidlab o'tdilar. Kambag'allikni qisqartirish borasida xalqaro tashkilotlar, shu BMTning taraqqiyot dasturi, Shanxay hamkorlik tashkiloti, UNICEF, xalqaro moliya institutlari, Jahon banki, Osiyo taraqqiyot banki va boshqa xalqaro tashkilotlar bilan ham demak yaqindan hamkorlik yo'lga qo'yildi. Amaliy yana bir qilgan ishimiz, boshlagan ishlarimiz bu ayniqsa o'sha pandemiya davrida o'zini muhimligini ko'rsatdi. Ijtimoiy ko'makka muhtoj va kam ta'minlangan oilalarga nafaqa va moddiy yordam berish yoki ko'rsatish qamrovini keskin oshirish ishlariga demak alohida e'tibor qaratildi. Yuqorida aytib o'tildi, mana shu hamkorlikda kambag'allikni qisqartirish bo'yicha strategiyani ishlab chiqyapmiz. Bugungi kunda bu loyiha ishlab chiqilgan va mana shu narsani aytishim kerakki, to'g'ri strategiya ishlab chiqilgan, lekin mazmunan va mohiyatan hukumatimiz tomonidan, davlatimiz rahbarida amalga oshirilayotgan ishlar уже bir strategik va o'zini taktik asoslariga ega. Chunki kambag'allikni qisqartirish haqida gap ketar ekan, bu qilinayotgan ishlarni biz bevosita 2 yoki 3 yo'nalishga bo'lib ko'rsatishimiz mumkin. Birinchi, bu bevosita aholini daromadlarini oshirish yoki daromad manbalarini kengaytirish bo'yicha qilinayotgan ishlar. Bu borada agar gapiradigan bo'lsak, biz soatlab gapirishimiz mumkin. Qator instrumentlar yaratildi. Oilaviy tadbirkorlikdan tortib aholini demak o'zini o'sha tomorqasidan, imkoniyatlaridan keng foydalanish. Bu bilan faqatgina tadbirkorlikda o'ziga pul berish yoki imtiyozli kredit berish emas, aholini o'qitish va ularni tadbirkorlikka ko'nikmalarini egallashga demak katta ahamiyat berilyapti. Keyingi masala bu o'sha biza ijtimoiy himoya va ijtimoiy ko'mak tizimi haqida gap aytishimiz mumkin. Bu ham mana o'tgan yili ijtimoiy demak nafaqa oluvchi oilalar soni 600 mingdan o'tgan yil boshida 600 ming, hattoki 600 mingdan sal pastroq bo'lgan bo'lsa, yil oxiriga kelib 1,2 million oilalarni demak tashkil etdi. So'zimni boshlanishda iqtisodiy o'sish, kambag'allikni qisqartirish va aholining turmush sharoitini yaxshilash uchun zamin yaratadi deb aytib o'tdim. Lekin shu bilan birga biz inson kapitalini rivojlantirish orqali, ya'ni o'qitish, ta'lim va kasbga, sog'lig'ini muhofaza qilish orqali nafaqat kambag'allikni qisqartirish, balki uzoq muddatli barqaror iqtisodiy o'sishni zamin deb qaraymiz. Ya'ni faqatgina iqtisodiy o'sish bu kambag'allikni qisqartirish va inson kapitaliga investitsiyalarni amalga oshirish uchun zamin yaratadi emas, balki mana shu inson kapitaliga qilingan investitsiyalar qaytadan, ya'ni mustahkam va barqaror iqtisodiy o'sish uchun ham bu ham bir zamin bo'lib xizmat qiladi. Bu bo'yicha demak hukumatda va nima deydi, mustahkam o'zini bir qarashi shakllanib boryapti. Agar raqamlarga to'xtalib o'tiladigan bo'lsa, bu borada amalga oshirayotgan ishlarimiz. Mana sog'liqni saqlash tizimida 2017-yilda davlat byudjetidan 7,3 trillion so'm ajratilgan bo'lsa, 2020-yilda 14,8 trillion so'm mablag' ajratildi yoki bu mana shu aytilgan ikki davrda solishtirganda 2 barobarga oshdi. Yalpi ichki mahsulotda demak sog'liqni saqlash borasida qilinayotgan xarajatlar 2,8%dan 3%gacha yetdi. Ta'lim sohasida demak 2020-yilda davlat xarajatlari yalpi ichki mahsulotga nisbatan 4,1% tashkil qilib, 2017-yildagi 3,8%ga nisbatan oshdi. ushbu ko'rsatkich 2021-yilda 4.4%da demak maqsad qilib belgilangan. Shu bilan birga 2017-yilda xususiy tibbiyot muassasalari soni 4.1 mingtani tashkil etgan bo'lsa, 2020-yilga kelib ularning soni 50% ga oshirilib 6.1 mingtaga yetdi. 2017-yilda bolalarning maktabgacha ta'lim bilan qamrab olish darajasi 27.3% tashkil etgan bo'lsa, 20-yil yakuniga ushbu ko'rsatkich 61% ga yetdi. Mana shu 4 yilda bu ham 2 barobardan ortiq qamrab darajasi. Chunki biz mana hozir boshqa bir narsani aytib o'tishimiz kerakki, haqiqatan ham bizda oldimizda mana shu inson kamoloti indeksi bo'yicha biz tahlil qilganimizda qanaqa imkoniyatlarimiz, qanaqa rezervlarimiz bor, nimani ko'proq e'tibor berishimiz kerak deganda, oldimizda haqiqatan ham katta o'sha chaqiriqlar yoki o'sha ingliz tilida aytganda challengelar turibdi. Birinchi navbatda bu o'sha demak nima deydi, sog'liqni saqlash tizimiga, ta'lim tizimiga nima deydi, yillar davomida qilinmagan yoki zarur hajmda qilinmagan investitsiyalarni endi bugungi kunga kelib bu katta nima deydi, bir zaruratni va talabni oldimizga qo'yadi. Bu narsa oson bo'lmaydi, lekin yana bir marta men ta'kidlab o'tmoqchimanki, kambag'allikni qisqartirishda demak asosiy muhim narsa bu kecha kunduzda bu demak o'sha kambag'al oilalar yoki kam ta'minlangan oilalarni birinchi navbatda ularni daromad topish imkoniyati bilan birga ularni farzandlarini sifatli ta'lim bilan qamrab olish masalasiga asosiy urg'u berilyapti. Faqatgina yaxshi sifatli ta'lim bilan biz kambag'al oilalarni demak kambag'allikdan olib chiqib ketishimiz mumkin. Oliy ta'lim masalasiga qaraydigan bo'lsak, mana oxirgi 4 yilda agar maktab bitiruvchilari, o'rta ta'lim bitiruvchilari 9% imkoniyatga ega bo'lgan bo'lsa, hozir kecha kunduzda demak bu ko'rsatkich 25% ga yetdi. Albatta buni biz keyingi yillarda 50% gacha demak chiqarish rejasini oldimizga qo'yganmiz. Oldimizda turgan masalalar demak mana shu belgilangan asosiy yo'nalishlar bo'yicha qiladigan ishlarimizni davom ettirish. Albatta yuqorida Senat raisi birinchi o'rinbosari ham aytib o'tdilar. Bu demak o'sha barqaror rivojlanish maqsadlari doirasida bu faqatgina o'sha kambag'allikni qisqartirish haligi bitta maqsad emas, bu yerda qator maqsadlar bor, o'zaro uzviy bog'liq bo'lib, bu o'sha yashirin iqtisodiyot deymiz, chunki bu ham bir muhim yo'nalish. Bu bo'yicha ham vazirligimizda mana hozir strategiya ishlab chiqilgan. Bu yo'nalishda ham biz alohida nima deydi, yondashuv yechimlarni taklif qilyapmiz va chora-tadbirlarni demak belgilab olganmiz. Yana bir narsani aytib o'tishim kerakki, shu yuqorida aytganimizdek, biz mana shu prezidentimizning murojaatnomalaridan topshiriq bo'lib berib o'tildi. Bu minimal iste'mol xarajatlari bo'yicha hozir kecha kunduzda bu masala haligi to'xtab qolgani yo'q. Bu bo'yicha juda ham faol ishlayapmiz. Buni ichiga kirganimiz orqali juda ham katta haligi masalalar va savollar tug'ilyapti. Birinchi navbatda biz bu ko'rsatkichga instrument sifatida, ya'ni kambag'allikni qisqartirish borasidagi instrument sifatida qarayapmiz va mana shu yagona ijtimoiy reyestr ham bu yildan boshlab to'liq ishga tushirildi va ikkita mana shu ijtimoiy reyestrda birinchi bosqichda va minimal iste'mol xarajatlarini birlashtirish orqali aholini demak o'sha ijtimoiy himoya va ijtimoiy ko'mak instrumentlari bilan qanaqa qilib sifatli qamrab olishimiz mumkin. Bu borada UNICEF bilan, Jahon banki ekspertlar bilan biz deyarli har kuni 1 marta, 2 marta gaplashib turibmiz. Demak, ularning takliflari, ular bilan gaplashib takliflarni demak mustahkamlab, ya'ni yaxshilab pishirib tayyorlab boryapmiz. Yaqin kunlarda bu narsa bo'yicha takliflarni kiritamiz. Takliflarimizni bir ichida demak mana shu ijtimoiy kontrakt degan masalani ham ko'tarib chiqaryapmiz. Demak, bu ijtimoiy kontrakt agar boshqacha aytilganda conditional and unconditional cash transferlar deyiladi. Endi ko'proq bu yerda o'sha shartli demak transferlar haqida gap ketyapti. Asosiy e'tibor ya'ni faqatgina bir tomonlama yordam emas, aholini, ayniqsa shu kam ta'minlangan kambag'al aholini ham motivatsiya qilish va ularni ham haligi qiziqtirish va bu yerda asosan shu xalqaro tajriba, ya'ni ularni farzandlarini sifatli ta'lim bilan qamrab olish masalasiga demak alohida e'tibor berilyapti. Agar ruxsat bersangizlar, obdaki mana shu yerda to'xtasam, chunki gapiradigan gap ko'p. Hali xudo xohlasa yana alohida xalqaro konferensiyalarni mo'ljallaganmiz. Yana keyingi marta gaplashamiz. Rahmat.
Rahmat kattadan katta Ilhom aka. Albatta qisqa qilib aytadigan bo'lsak, O'zbekiston Respublikasida o'sha kambag'allikni qisqartirish va aholi farovonligini oshirish faqatgina bu ijtimoiy himoya yoki daromadlar emas, demak, Ilhom aka aytgandek, ta'lim, sog'liqni saqlash va o'sha ijtimoiy himoyaning sifatini oshirish bo'yicha bir qator yo'nalishlarda ishlar ketyapti va bularni hali nima deydi, konferensiyamiz davomida yana bularga to'xtalib o'tamiz. As you know that as our main, partner in in development process, Undp is strongly committed to support human development in Uzbekistan, and we are very pleased to be joined live from New York. Ms. Mirjana Spolarich-Egger and the UN Assistant Secretary General, Undp Assistant Administrator and Regional Director for Europe and the CIS. Ms. Spolarich is a strong supporter of UNDP's work on human development in the region and in Uzbekistan. Dear Mirjana, the floor is yours, please. No.
Thank you very much. I hope you can now you can hear me. All good. Good morning from New York. Good afternoon to Tashkent, colleagues, excellencies, distinguished guests. I'm very pleased to join you today at the Uzbekistan launch of the UNDP 2020 Human Development Report, and thank you for the interesting presentations that I've listened to carefully. And apologies if I repeat some of the points that have already been mentioned by my previous speakers. We will remember 2020 as the year in which we as humans, the dominant force on Earth, were so radically humbled by a very tiny virus. And part of the self-definition of us as humans has historically been one of planned control over life world, mainly through tools and construction, and hence the notion of progress and human advancement. But in this latest Human Development Report, our 30th anniversary report, it is set out that humanity today is waging a war against itself. Because we have to consider that the total mass of the things humans have made now exceeds the total mass of all living things on the planet. And today humans literally have the power to alter the atmosphere and the biosphere in which we live. And no species has ever had this kind of power before. And with it, we have achieved incredible things and progress, but we have also taken the climate, the earth, and all the people on it to the brink. And to show the extent of our impact, the 2020 Human Development Report now introduces a new and experimental human development index, which is adjusted for planetary pressures. And this index shows that no country in the world has managed yet to combine high human development with low planetary pressure. But this does not mean that we should give up here. What we want is to find ways together with countries like Uzbekistan to continue to advance development while reducing the degradation and unsustainable exploitation of our physical environment. And for this transformation to happen, we require a number of bold steps to be taken. And first, and we heard this by my previous speaker, we need to enhance our capabilities. Globally and nationally, we need to invest in high quality education and support innovation and technological development that helps reduce ecological footprints. And second, we will need to improve incentives and change social norms to ensure that we work together with nature and not against it. And third, we need to actively explore and promote nature-based solutions. The 2020 Human Development Report identifies 20 nature-based solutions that can deliver 37% of the greenhouse gas reductions needed by 2030 to keep global warming below 20 degrees Celsius. And as we recover from the immediate fallout of COVID-19, we have to design green recovery plans that foster a transition to low carbon, climate resilient, fair and job-rich development paths. And the Green Recovery Forum, which I had the pleasure to attend myself very recently, and which was organized jointly by UNDP and the government, was a very important platform to discuss how this can happen. At UNDP, we are now preparing a new 3-part offer to build the conversation based on the 2020 Human Development Report that Pedro is going to present to you in more detail in a few minutes. This new offer will include expertise and tools that help countries opt for the right policies, building on the data of the report itself. We offer integrated programmatic and financial support that goes beyond quick technical fixes, because we want to accelerate the transition towards greener and more equitable development paths, as I've mentioned already. And finally, we want to offer tailored national and local policy dialogues to support the evolution of new social norms and build coalitions for change. Our support is designed to help policy and decision makers to look beyond recovery. We want to look towards 2030, making choices and managing complexity and uncertainty in 4 main areas: governance, social protection, green recovery, green economy more precisely, and digital disruption. Our team in Uzbekistan, under the leadership of Matilda, is already working in designing interventions in all these areas, and I'm sure you're well aware of it. Now, new initiatives are launched on piloting green models through area-based development in the Fergana Valley and the Aral Sea region. And what we are doing in the Aral Sea region in particular is informing also our work now in other countries in the region as well, the way we design portfolios for green and better recovery. We want to improve access to integrated social protection for the poor and support the government in this area, particularly looking at the most vulnerable groups. We want to support Uzbekistan's digital transformation and investments in green skills and jobs, especially for the young. And of course, governance and the empowerment of women remain the backbone of our work across all these areas. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, and dear excellencies, I would just like to thank the government of Uzbekistan once more, and all of you for the long-standing partnership. I look forward to strengthening our collaboration. And before closing, let me just emphasize once more that UNDP fully supports Uzbekistan's green development agenda. I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully this year or in the near future. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mariana Spolaric-Egger. And we appreciate your continuous support for the development process in Uzbekistan. And now let's proceed to our first plenary session. Demak, birinchi seksiyamizga o'tamiz. Demak, bu seksiyamizni nomi demak inson taraqqiyoti va uning Anthropocene erasi deb nomlanadi. Va bunda birinchi so'zni demak o'sha inson taraqqiyoti hisoboti ofisi, demak Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotining inson taraqqiyoti ofisi rahbari demak Pedro Conciago. Mr. Pedro Conciago is the director of the Human Development Report Office of UNDP and the lead author of the report. Pedro will briefly present us the global perspectives of the HDR and the global challenges in human development. Mr. Conciago, please have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be given the opportunity to share briefly the key messages of the 2020 Human Development Report. It's nice to see Matilda, even though far away and virtually. And like Mariana said, I hope that soon we can all meet together in person and we can have these interactions face to face. My colleague Ben Slay will shortly provide some detail about the report and what it means in the context of the region and in Uzbekistan specifically. So I would like to briefly highlight three key messages from the report. The first is that the 2020 Human Development Report can be seen as an invitation to look at challenges such as COVID-19 and the climate emergency as reflections of this unprecedented moment in our history and in the history of our planet that Mariana spoke about, as opposed to looking at them as separate problems. Indeed, it looks like we're facing a unique moment when human pressures on the planet as a whole are driving dangerous changes. And they are dangerous because they are harming us, people, but also all life on the planet. This has been described as a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, and it's characterized by the emergence of a new set of risks that result from the fact that, as the United Nations Secretary General put it late last year, humanity is seemingly waging a war on nature. The second key message is that these new risks are superimposed on a world with large and often growing inequalities that often seem to be exacerbated by these risks. In the report, we documented that is the case, certainly when it comes to the impact of COVID-19 and of climate change. Now, these inequalities are linked to gaps in consumption and in power between those that extract too much and pollute too much, and those bearing the consequences of these actions. These asymmetries happen across countries, but crucially, and I think this is an important contribution of the report, within countries as well, with some groups being systematically affected. So we know, for instance, that gender inequalities are being exacerbated with COVID-19, that pollution still harms disproportionately more racial and ethnic minorities, that human rights violations overlap with the destruction of ecosystems. For instance, forced and slave labor occurs in the very fishing fleets that are destroying ocean ecosystems around the world. To highlight these asymmetries in power, the report shows that the contribution of indigenous peoples to manage forests that work to mitigate climate change as a carbon sink is roughly equivalent to the carbon dioxide emissions, which contribute to climate change, of the top 1% of the global income distribution, both on a per capita basis. And in these indigenous peoples are often the very people that are marginalized around the world. So we see that the social imbalances, inequalities in resources, in opportunities, in power and voice, are putting people and planet on a collision course. Finally, the third message, and I will conclude, is that all of this is not inevitable and depends on our choices. Human development is often seen as being about people's well-being, and it is, but it's also about seeing people as agents of change, as being able to make different choices. But this calls for giving people conditions to do so. And in the 2020 Human Development Report, as Miriam alluded to, we supplement Human Development Index with a new index of planetary pressures that combines indicators of material footprint per person and carbon dioxide emissions per capita. If we plot the current values of these two indicators for all countries, or for these two indices, I should say, for all countries, in a two-dimensional graph, we see that the aspirational space of high human development and low planetary pressures is now empty. And Ben will speak more about this index and what it means for Uzbekistan after my presentation. Now, to take us there to this aspirational space, the report lays out three mechanisms to encourage people to make different choices. I'll go over them briefly. Miriam has already alluded to them. The first is harnessing social norms. We know that the key predictor of people's behavior is what others around them do and expect them to do. So much like social norms around things like using masks have changed rapidly, we must harness social norms that give a greater weight to easing planetary pressures. Secondly, prices and regulations can be used to shift economic incentives. Carbon prices and fossil fuel subsidies phasing out are examples. But the report puts an emphasis on the importance of incentives, but also investments in research, technology, and innovation to continue to expand the frontier of knowledge. And then finally, looking at nature not as a constraint, but actually as a potential opportunity in advancing human development by protecting and restoring ecosystems. And what Uzbekistan is doing in the Aral Sea can be an example for the world. Our administrator, Achim Steiner, often speaks of the ecological infrastructure upon which ultimately all our lives depend upon. So to conclude, if we have the power to change our planet, we also have the power to make different choices. So our hope is that the 2020 Human Development Report will help somehow signpost how to continue to advance human development while easing planetary pressures, moving us towards meeting the aspirations of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Hammalaringizga ma'lumki, bu taraqqiyot har bir hududda har xil amalga oshiriladi, har xil boradi. Shuning uchun bu mana shu har bir hududni o'ziga xosligini, uni tahlil qilib, ulardan yaxshi darslarni olish yoki bo'lmasa aytaylik o'zimizni tajribalarimizni demak ularga bo'lishish ham bu juda ham bir muhimdir. Va shu borada mana bitta narsani aytishimiz kerakki, mana hozir suhbatlarimizda ham bir qandaydir qarab turgan bo'lsak, ayrim hollarda bizlar mana shu inson taraqqiyoti deyapmiz, bir ayrim hollarda inson kamoloti deyapmiz. Mana shu inson taraqqiyoti, inson kamoloti hisobotini mana shu O'zbekistonda ham bir qandaydir shu terminologiyalarni ham umumlashtirish, menimcha bu hisobotlarni ham O'zbekistonda kelajakdagi o'sha davom etishiga ham bir qandaydir bir turtki yoki bo'lmasa aytaylik bir yordam bergan faktor sifatida ham ko'rishimiz mumkin. Va talking about the regional perspectives, so now we would like to give the floor to the the senior economist of the UNDP Regional Bureau for Europe and the CIS, to the Mr. Bensley, please. Mr. Bensley will talk about the recent trends in human development in Central Asian region and what lessons we can learn from other countries and what kind of, the new, the practices or experiences we can share with our neighbors. Please, Ben.
Thank you very much, Director Hakimov, Senator Safoyev, colleagues. Let me now share my screen and start my presentation, if you'll permit me. It's really a great pleasure to participate in this meeting. Let me start by looking at the question of what is the Human Development Index that is the most common tool used to measure human development. And we oftentimes hear statements about countries moving up the ranking or having a Human Development Index score of such and such. But what does that really mean? Well, the Human Development Index is a measure of people's abilities to live long and productive lives. It has three dimensions: health, education, and living standards. And if a country had the best scores on each of these three dimensions, its Human Development Index, or HDI, would be 1.0. These three dimensions are measured by four components or four indicators: life expectancy at birth, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling, and gross national income per capita. So this is a multi-dimensional welfare indicator that goes beyond simply income as a measure of progress and development. And I should add that the data on which these ratings are based come from national sources, from national statistical offices. They're collected by UN agencies as well as the World Bank and IMF, who are authorized to collect this data by the United Nations General Assembly. And we in UNDP and the Human Development Report Office that Pedro is the director of simply take these data that are already collected by the other partners. So we're not coming up with this ourselves so much as we are using what is already coming from national sources. So what kinds of stories do these numbers tell? Well, if we take the human development HDI levels, but also progress in Uzbekistan and neighboring countries, for the most recent year, the 2019 data that we have, Uzbekistan is in the category of high human development with an HDI of 0.720, which places the country in 106th place. This is between China, which is in 85th place, and Turkmenistan in terms of neighboring countries, which is in 112th. The neighbors that are at the very high human development level include Kazakhstan and the Russian Federation at 51st and 52nd places in the global ranking. The difference between very high and high human development is that the 0.8 barrier or border is what differentiates those two categories. By contrast, when we look at neighboring Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, we see countries in the medium human development category with HDIs below 0.7. And then Afghanistan, your southern neighbor, is in the low human development category with an HDI of 0.511. So this is the most recent, if you like, comparison that we can make for these countries. That's a snapshot from 2019, but we can also look at how this has changed over time. And what we see is that we look at a cumulative growth in the HDI, then the most rapid growth is reported by Afghanistan, obviously from the very low level. The global average for cumulative growth in this time is 14% in the HDI, and Russia is right at that level, whereas Uzbekistan, as well as neighboring Kazakhstan and Tajikistan, have reported faster than the global average cumulative improvement in HDI during this time. So this gives you a sense of how, using the standard measurements of human development, Uzbekistan rests compared to neighboring countries, both in terms of a snapshot with the most recent year and over time, cumulative growth. Now, human development indicators can also be used to measure inequalities. And one of the tools that can be used in this respect is gender disaggregation of HDIs. And we see that, for example, when we take that 0.720 HDI for Uzbekistan as a whole, that number looks quite different for women as opposed to men. The men's HDI in Uzbekistan is estimated to be 0.74, whereas women's HDI is estimated to be below 0.7, roughly 0.695. What accounts for the difference? Well, the main cause is gaps in income, where in purchasing power parity terms measured in 2017 prices, per capita gross national income for men is above $9,000, whereas for women, it's about $5,000. So a lot of this is income, but gaps in education also contribute, where mean years of education are lower for women as opposed to men. So we can also use human development indicators and metrics to get a sense of inequalities and ways in which averages for a country as a whole may not fully reflect the complexities and the challenges facing individual groups or regions or other disaggregations within the country. As has been mentioned, this human development report introduces on an experimental basis the HDI adjusted for planetary pressures, or the so-called PHDI. And as both Pedro and Miriana have pointed out, this gives us a sense of the extent to which human development progress is occurring at the cost of planetary pressures. Well, what actually is this PHDI? It is a measure of HDIs adjusted for greenhouse gas emissions on a per capita basis and material footprint on a per capita basis. So the consumption of land, energy, water, raw materials that can be attributed on a per capita basis to an individual. And what we see on this graph is that planetary pressures grow as human development increases. And whereas countries at low or medium levels of human development tend to be very close to the line of equality, where there is no significant deviation in the PHDI from the HDI because planetary pressures associated with that country are relatively small. As we move along this so-called line of equality and the level of human development increases towards high and very high, we find greater and greater differences between the line of inequality and the actual country points. And this raises the question of, is it possible to reduce these gaps and in effect to decouple progress in human development from planetary pressures? And it turns out it's easier to decouple human development progress from greenhouse gas emissions than it is to decouple human development progress from material footprints. And we'll look at some of these trade-offs in the context of Uzbekistan and its neighbors. Now, if we look at the PHDI for Uzbekistan and neighboring countries, and we take that graph that we just saw moments ago and focus in solely on Uzbekistan and its neighborhood, we see that the human development losses in Uzbekistan due to planetary pressures are relatively small. That is to say, the gap between the line of equality that would show no, if you like, displacement of the country's place in the HDI because of planetary pressures, that gap is relatively small. By contrast, some countries like Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan have much larger gaps, and also the Russian Federation. Another way to see this is to look at the question of how much the country's rating in the Human Development Index changes globally when the impact of planetary pressures is taken into account. And Kazakhstan, for example, because of the large gap between its country point and this line of equality, actually loses 46 places. It moves from something like 51st place to a 97th place when planetary pressures adjust the HDI. For Turkmenistan, there's a reduction in 18 places, and for China, there's a reduction in 16 places. For Russia, the Russian Federation loses 4 places. By contrast, Uzbekistan actually gains 15 places in the global HDI ranking, so to speak, as do Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan as well. So what this shows is that Uzbekistan compares well in terms of managing these planetary pressures, but this also raises the question of, as Uzbekistan's human development progress continues, how will Uzbekistan manage the planetary pressures associated with emitting greenhouse gases, associated with using natural resources, water, energy, land, etc. I raised the question earlier of how countries can deal with the planetary pressures. In particular, that involves greenhouse gas emissions or decarbonization and waste management in terms of reducing material footprints. Let's look at what's happened to changes on a per capita basis in greenhouse gas emissions roughly during the last decade, between 2010 and 2017, in Uzbekistan and in neighboring countries as well. And we see that during this time, the global average for changes in per capita greenhouse gas emissions was 0. That is to say, growth in greenhouse gas emissions was due to population growth rather than to growth in emissions per capita. And what we see is, whereas some countries like Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan had relatively rapid growth in per capita greenhouse gas emissions during this time, Uzbekistan actually reports a reduction on a per capita basis in greenhouse gas emissions, while at the same time recording human development progress. So this shows how Uzbekistan, in fact, is making progress or has made progress in decoupling human development progress from greenhouse gas emissions. And there are some interesting questions about what has made that possible. A lot of it has to do with moving away from coal towards gas and to increasing the integrity of the gas, especially transport infrastructure, to reduce emissions of methane, unplanned emissions. But if we look instead at waste management and the material footprint, we may see a different story. And in fact, Here we see the changes in per capita material footprints for the same group of countries over the same time period. And we see that here, the global picture is not so positive. In per capita terms, material footprint during 2010 to 2017 grew 11%. And although growth in Uzbekistan was less than the global average, there still is growth in Uzbekistan. And this underscores the difficulty of decoupling human development progress away from material footprints and managing both the resources at our disposal and the waste that we produce from those resources in a sustainable manner. So what kinds of policy and programming recommendations does the report make in light of these challenges? It makes a number of suggestions that can easily come under the heading of the green economy or green recovery. And it does so within the framework of these three sets of policy or programming approaches, namely incentives, regulations, and social norms and values. If we look at incentives, something that the report emphasizes is the importance of fossil fuel subsidies, which so often provide the wrong incentives. They provide incentives to invest more in coal and less in renewable energy, less in energy efficiency, and similar technologies. And although these are not HDRO data, these are IMF data, the most recent internationally comparable data that we find suggests that there are significant budget subsidies in Uzbekistan, as well as in neighboring countries, for fossil fuels. And so if these subsidies could be reduced, it would not only improve incentives, but would also free up resources, fiscal resources, to reduce inequalities by, say, investing more funds in social protection to close gaps in social safety nets. Taxes on labor could be reduced to make it easier to create new jobs and new good jobs. Reducing fossil fuel subsidies would make it possible to support more investment in waste management to reduce material footprints and manage them more sustainably, to invest more in renewable energy and water and energy efficiency, ecotourism, and the like. So this is one area in which in Uzbekistan and in neighboring countries, we may wish to look for suggestions to change not only policies, but also associated incentives. If we look at green economy, green recovery suggestions in terms of regulation, I think in a country like Uzbekistan, there's a lot of potential to look at urban planning and planning for the growth in urban areas as opportunities for green economy and green recovery, especially in terms of integrating waste management and the protection of biodiversity into the planning for the growth in cities and urban areas. A second area or related area for regulation is not so much developing new regulation, but enforcing those regulations that already exist in terms of waste management, in terms of how landfills are managed, for example, constructed, and their ongoing management is handled. And in terms of social norms and values, there's great potential for increased communication in Uzbekistan and neighboring countries to make the concept of reduce, reuse, recycle a household phrase, so that individuals don't think of saving the planet as the government's problem, but think about what they can do in their household to consume differently, to separate their own trash, to make recycling easier for local waste managers. This is very much an issue of individual behavior and social norms. There's also questions of engaging local communities or community-based activism and engagement and empowerment to have nature-based solutions for sustainable economic growth, be this sustainable forestry or agriculture, be this ecotourism, or whatever activities we're talking about. So with this, на этом я хотел бы закончить свою презентацию. Если есть какие-нибудь вопросы, я готов ответить на русском.
Thank you very much, Ben. You're always welcome to Uzbekistan. Mana qisqacha qilib aytadigan bo'lsak, mana hozirgi nima deydi prezentatsiyadan bitta narsani aytishimiz kerakki, qancha inson taraqqiyoti yuqori bo'lsa, ularni o'sha atrof muhitga, ya'ni o'sha planetamizga, sayyoramizga bo'layotgan ta'siri juda ham yuqoriligini ko'rdik hozir. Va mana shu O'zbekistonda bo'layotgan taraqqiyot boshqa mamlakatlardan farqli o'laroq, demak, tashqi muhitga, planetamizga, o'sha sayyoramizga minimal, ya'ni kam ta'sirlar natijasida bo'layotganini ham biz buni bir hozir ko'rib o'tdik. Endi bu hammasi mana shu oxirgi 4 yilda qilinayotgan islohotlarni o'sha mevasi desa bu xato bo'lmaydi va eng muhim narsa bu narsada to'xtab qolish emas, ya'ni yanada davom ettirish, buni yanada nima deydi rivojlantirish va bu uchun motivatsiya, ya'ni o'sha qonun qoidalarni o'zgartirish va ijtimoiy normalarimizga demak qandaydir tuzatishlar kiritish to'g'ri keladi. Va nima deydi atrofdagi mamlakatlar demak tajribasini ko'rdik hozir va endi hozir O'zbekistonda bu borada qilinayotgan ishlar bo'yicha ham tanishib o'tamiz. Bu bo'yicha demak O'zbekiston Respublikasi Moliya vazirining o'rinbosari Odiljon Isoqov demak o'z prezentatsiyalarida aytib o'tadilar. Marhamat.
Rahmat. Assalomu alaykum hurmatli tadbir qatnashchilari. Taklif qilganlaringiz uchun rahmat va o'ylaymanki bu tadbir ham hukumat uchun ham xalqimiz uchun turli xil nodavlat notijorat tashkilotlari uchun juda ham foydali va kerakli hisobotni va O'zbekistonda qilinayotgan ishlarni bir joyga jamlovchi tadbir va shuning uchun qisqagina prezentatsiyam bor. Agar ruxsat bersalaringiz prezentatsiyamni ingliz tilida qilsam, chunki ko'p terminlar ingliz tilida, hali Obid aka aytib o'tganingizdek o'zbek tilida mana shu terminlarni tarjima qilib bir kitob shakliga keltirish uchun hali ko'p ishlarni qilishimiz kerak. Va mana shu inson taraqqiyoti hisobotini o'zbek tilida chop etilgani ham menimcha juda ham yaxshi jarayonning boshlanishi. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Let me start with the first page, and these are the key messages from the address of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan to the Parliament and to the nation. And you can see the key snapshot of focus points. So continuous learning and development, healthcare, education, life expectancy, focus on sanitary and epidemiology, which showed its importance in COVID. When last year it hit us and it hit many other countries, we realized that there's a lot more money we should spend. There's a lot more focus and attention we should pay on this area, because COVID-19 was a wake-up call to humanity, and COVID-19 was a wake-up call for us as well. Next slide, please. Priority international ratings and indices. Sadiq Salihevich, our first deputy chairman of the Senate, pointed out 24 ratings and indices that Uzbekistan has been following since 2017. And Human Development Index is one of them. It is quite an important index, as many of my colleagues have suggested. And improvement, although it's a small improvement in rankings, is still a very, very good progress, and there's a lot that a lot of effort is behind this improvement, both from the government and organizations. Next slide, please. A new mechanism, also First Deputy Chairman mentioned, on the parliamentary control, where chairperson of the Senate is heading the Republican Council with two working bodies, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Justice, and now the more we look into all these 24 ratings and indices, including Human Development Index, the more we realize we have to go even deeper and even further. And therefore, in the last meeting of the Republican Council, we decided to actually implement this whole system of educating ratings and indices all the implications at the university level. University level, not just research institutes, but also universities which are relevant in their own relevant fields. They have to look at those international ratings and they have to look at all the sub-indicators where Uzbekistan is progressing where Uzbekistan is not progressing well. And we have to promote research on this area by providing grants. And this is a new project that we are currently working on, something we want to agree with other ministries, but something that is going to be next step in our work on deepening efforts to improve on international ratings and indices. And just to clarify, improving international ratings and indices is not the sole intention that we have. It's about improving welfare of people. And it's about improving environment for businesses, so improving business climate. So if we achieve both, and if we do it on a systematic manner, looking at the experience of other countries who's done well, who hasn't done well, I'm sure there needs to be much more effort to have targeted reforms. Next slide, please. Now, in the presidential decree, which set out the new framework back in June last year, we've introduced KPIs, working together with line ministries. And Human Development Index is managed by the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction, along with Sustainable Development Goals and other two important indicators. And our target for 2030 Human Development Index is 0.82. This will put us in line with Turkey currently. And this will put us to the league of very high human development category. So that's our goal in the next 10 years. This KPI, we have responsible ministry in charge, and we have created a system and which will further deepen and progress. Next slide, please. And the other one, I think we don't need to. Next slide. This is also web portal which is now created, ratings.go.uz. This has all 24 ratings, Uzbekistan's performance. We've also included research materials and statistical database, so I invite colleagues to also visit this website. We also have KPI system, so at the back end, all the presidential decrees, all the other important documents are uploaded, and there is a system of controlling online how we are progressing on set of measures. And it's important when you put KPI for 2030, 10 years from now, it's important that we divide all the tasks on an annual basis, sometimes on a quarterly basis, and to have this system of monitoring it in real time. Now I move on to case studies. Case studies, next slide, please. Case studies are important because what we have to do in Uzbekistan to progress from where we are to 0.82 or to that high human development category requires quite a lot of investments in schools, health care, water and sewage facilities, and road infrastructure. As simple as that. We need to be smart, we need to invest, and we need to continue investing. So the last Eurobond we issued in Uzbek Sums, so that was the first debut Uzbek Sum denominated Eurobond in London Stock Exchange. It carries a development finance title. Basically, every single sum in that bond will go to the purposes which will help us in our human development, SDGs and human development. If you go to the next slide, you see what kind of projects will be implemented. Next slide. Yes. What kind of projects will be implemented with this money? So this is, 25 new schools, construction of 25 new schools, reconstruction of 21 existing schools, 3 new health facilities, financial assistance to women and families. So gender inequality is something that we suffer in our country. Comprehensive support to motherhood and childhood. So this is just a snapshot of projects that we're doing. I mean, it's just where 2 trillion is going. But Uzbekistan's budget is much more than 2 trillion. Uzbekistan's capex is about 17 trillion if you look at the budgetary expenditures. So this is a small snapshot of how much of the budget we're spending on human development. But this time what we are trying to do is something different. We've teamed up with UNDP and previous slide, if you can put previous slide. Yes. We are about to sign Memorandum of Understanding between UNDP and Ministry of Finance. And the main purpose is to have UNDP support in terms of how this 2 trillion is spent and how it's impacting on our, on our HDI, on our SDG, in general, how these projects are helping ordinary person on the street. That's about that. And what we're trying to achieve here is a lot more transparency. We will have a dedicated website. We will have project reporting during the life of the projects, post-implementation, and also what our partnership goes beyond that. So for the next bond issuances or next borrowings that we will have, we will make sure that the projects that we line up for the next borrowing will have even greater impact on human development. So that's case study 1, something that will be implemented in 2021 and early 2022. The second case study, again, something that we believe will have an impact is our work to achieve QS and Times Higher Education rankings. Something that we haven't done before. Currently, we're negotiating with QS World University Rankings and Times Higher Education rating agencies. And to be frank, we don't know where our universities will end up. We simply do not know. But unless we start now, unless we look at this holistically and put our universities in that ranking, we do not know if the quality of education at our universities are good enough, as simple as that. And this will also push the universities, publicly funded or privately funded, it doesn't matter. This will push them to improve their rankings in those important indices. And hopefully this will also help us achieve a better education in the university. So these are the only 2 case studies that I want to show, but there are many more that the government is doing, and my colleagues have already mentioned. And I believe that with such focus from Parliament, from senior members of the government, and the President himself, of course, Uzbekistan will be investing more on human development, will be investing more on achieving our sustainable development goals. And I hope that this will help our ordinary people in a much more efficient and transparent manner. Thank you. Rahmat.
Katta rahmat Odiljon aka. mana hammamiz bitta narsaga e'tibor qilishimiz kerak. E'tiborlaringizni bir narsaga qaratmoqchimanki, mana tashqi qarzlar evaziga amalga oshirilayotgan loyihalar bularning hammasi demak O'zbekiston Respublikasiga inson taraqqiyotiga yo'naltirilgan loyihalar. Demak, birgina mana shu iqtisodiy hamkorlik va taraqqiyot tashkilotini qilgan o'sha nima deydi ilmiy izlanishlarini qaraydigan bo'lsak, birgina mana shu aytaylik ichimlik suvini ta'minlash orqasidan biz masalan aytaylik o'sha bolalar o'limini keskin kamaytirish, demak 10% gacha, yosh bolalar orasidagi har xil infeksion kasalliklarni 30% gacha kamaytirishimiz mumkin. Bu degani faqatgina o'sha bolalarni sog'lig'ini tiklash emas, demak biz bu kelajakdagi inson kapitaliga qilayotgan investitsiyamiz bu. Demak, kelajakda demak o'z qaytimini beradi. Bu kelajakda haqiqatan ham O'zbekistonni yanada buyuk, yanada taraqqiy etgan mamlakat qilib shakllanishiga yordam beradi. Va bitta narsani aytib o'tish kerak, post pandemiya davrida mana hammamiz shohidi bo'ldikki, davlatning ko'magi, ya'ni o'sha yashil iqtisodiy transformatsiya jarayonida davlatning ko'magi haqiqatan ham bu hal qiluvchi bir katta kuch bo'ldi. Va bu taraqqiyot bor ekanki, taraqqiyotni biz yashil iqtisodiy transformatsiyasiz tasavvur ham qila olmaymiz. Va bu o'sha mamlakatimizda yashil iqtisodiy transformatsiya jarayonlarni amalga oshirish bo'yicha O'zbekiston Respublikasining Senatini o'sha ekologik harakat bo'yicha eng faol a'zosi desam xato qilmagan bo'laman. Demak, Boris Batovich Alixanovga so'z bersak va bu borada qilinayotgan ishlar haqida prezentatsiyalarni ko'ramiz. Marhamat.
Rahmat. Assalomu alaykum. Muhtarama Matilda Dimovska, muhtarama Galina Karimovna, hurmatli Sadiq Saidovich, hurmatli rais, xonimlar va janoblar. Men uchun bunday anjumanda qatnashish va ma'ruza qilish katta sharaf. Действительно, преодоление старой модели ресурсоемкой экономики, приводящей к увеличению расходов и снижению производительности, росту негативного воздействия на окружающую среду, одна из острых проблем современности. Сегодня многие страны мира активизируют свою экологическую политику с целью перехода от традиционной модели развития, где охрана окружающей среды считается нагрузкой на экономику, к модели, при которой экология признана двигателем развития, то есть к зеленой экономике. Сегодня каждый из нас начинает задумываться, что происходит с окружающей средой. Ответ очевиден. Мы являемся не только свидетелями пандемии природы, но и во многом ее виновниками. По нашему мнению, имеется идиома теории критической температуры. Планета Земля является единым организмом, в чем-то подобным живому организму. Биологический организм при нарушении функций нормальной жизнедеятельности в качестве меры по защите от вредных бактерий и вирусов повышает температуру тела, что способствует улучшению его сопротивляемости вредному воздействию. Но в то же время есть критический предел таких действий для человека. Например, повышение температуры тела 42 градуса по Цельсию. 42 градуса может привести к летальному исходу. У Земли также имеется критический предел, превышение которого приведет к необратимым процессам. Провозглашение нового глобального зеленого курса – это один из путей развития, способный вернуть мировой экономический и финансовым системам устойчивость, обеспечить стабильный рост человеческого развития. В упрощенном понимании зеленая экономика – это экономика с эффективным использованием природных ресурсов, широким применением возобновляемых ресурсосберегающих, без и малоотходных технологий, с низкими выбросами парниковых газов, с существенным снижением рисков для окружающей среды. Именно поэтому президент нашей страны Шавкат Мироманович Мирзиёев 14 июня 2019 года на заседании Совета глав государств-членов ШОС в Бишкеке предложил принять программу «Зеленого пояса» в целях широкого внедрения в странах ШОС современных ресурсосберегающих и экологически чистых технологий. Развитие зеленой экономики, в том числе в контексте снижения негативных последствий Аральского кризиса, и социально-экономической экологической реабилитации региона Приораля имеют актуальное значение не только для Узбекистана, но и для всей Центральной Азии. В наши дни многие государства, организации экономического сотрудничества и развития уже приняли политические решения о переходе на возобновляемые источники энергии, всемирно поощрять органическое сельское хозяйство, увеличивают субсидии на развитие экологических проектов и отрасли возобновляемых источников энергии, повышают продуктивность земли и воды, совершенствуют нормативно-правовые документы в области развития и стимулирования зеленой экономики. В этих условиях в рамках последовательного и поэтапного осуществления в Узбекистане реформ в сфере государственного и общественного строительства на первый план выдвигаются задачи, ориентированные на ускорение процесса перехода нашей страны к зеленой экономике и эффективное достижение целей устойчивого развития. Более того, это становится ключевым вопросом в условиях борьбы с изменением климата. Вследствие высыхания Аральского моря климатические изменения в бассейне этого моря происходят гораздо жестче, чем в других регионах. Точнее, в 2 раза интенсивнее средних значений в мире. Увеличилась дневная амплитуда температур, снизилась относительная влажность воздуха. Особенно в теплый период года возросло количество дней с температурой воздуха более чем 40 градусов по Цельсию. В связи с этим Узбекистаном предпринимаются следующие меры. По реализации политических решений в области укрепления регионального сотрудничества, по совершенствованию нормативно-правовой базы в сфере охраны окружающей среды, по разработке и приему программ и стратегий развития, по осуществлению инвестиционных проектов, по организации научно-практических форумов с участием ведущих экспертов в области экологии. Следует отметить, что сегодня в Приорале проводятся не имеющие аналогов широкомасштабная работа по улучшению экономической, социальной и экологической ситуации. На высохшем дне Аральского моря только за период с декабря 2018 года по март 2021 года засеяны семенами так называемых пустынноустойчивых растений, как саксаул, около 1 700 000 гектар. Посадка пустынноустойчивых растений на дне Арала одновременно решает несколько важных задач. Первое. Создаются условия для смягчения состояния окружающей среды, предотвращения дальнейшей деградации природных ресурсов. Второе. Обеспечивается максимальный объем пескоудержания на осушенном дне Арала. Третье. Формируется благоприятная экосистема для распространения и размножения различных видов фауны. И, наконец, четвертое. Увеличение площадей пустынных лесов и биоразнообразие создаст условия смягчения климата в этом регионе. Среди перспективных направлений внедрения зеленой экономики в аграрный сектор республики – развитие производства экологически чистых сельхозпродуктов. Еще одной инициативой Узбекистана стала разработка и принятие концепции взаимодействия в области умного сельского хозяйства и внедрения агроинноваций, которые будут способствовать решению проблем продовольственной безопасности в регионе, усугубляющихся на фоне роста населения, истощения земельно-водных ресурсов и изменений климата. В то же время остро ощущается потребность в научно-инновационных разработках в таких сферах, как органическое земледелие, персонализированное и умное сельское хозяйство, создание генотипов сельхозкультур с высокой урожайностью и устойчивых к суровым почвенно-климатическим условиям. Кроме того, около 90% всех водных ресурсов региона Центральной Азии используются в сельском хозяйстве, пока все еще с неэффективными методами орошения. В этих условиях актуализируется вопрос обмена опытом между нашими странами в разработке и внедрении современных экологически чистых ресурсов и водосберегающих технологий в сельском хозяйстве. Я хочу отметить, что мы разработали новую биоагротехнологию, которая увеличивает урожайность, уменьшает потребление воды. Вместо применения минеральных и химических удобрений используется биоагротехнология, которая является, как сегодня называется, ноу-хау и инновационными технологиями. Важнейшими направлениями озеленения водного сектора республики также является совершенствование системы питьевого водоснабжения и развитие экологически безопасных систем канализации. Модернизация водопроводных сетей, проводимая в районах с недостаточным развитием централизованного питьевого водоснабжения, представляет практические шаги по озеленению данного сектора. Так, в зоне Приораля развитие данного сектора намечено как на базе совершенствования магистральных водоводов, так и на основе создания локальных систем опреснительных установок. В целях совершенствования питьевого водоснабжения и санитарии населенных пунктов, а также улучшения здоровья населения в стране, принимаются решительные меры по усилению охраны источников питьевого водоснабжения от загрязнения и истощения, по обеспечению питьевой водой труднодоступных и отдаленных сельских населенных пунктов, по совершенствованию систем очистки промышленных и бытовых стоков городов и населенных пунктов. Особую роль в процессе перехода энергетического сектора Узбекистана к зеленой экономике играет развитие возобновляемых источников энергии. В структуре первичных топливно-энергетических ресурсов нашей страны в основном занимает нефть, газ, а также уголь и отчасти гидроэнергетика. Несмотря на большой потенциал возобновляемых источников энергии, их доля не достигает даже 1%. Фактор ресурсной ограниченности углеводородных источников энергии, масштабы и темпы их истощения побуждают принять необходимые меры, чтобы не выпасть из глобального тренда масштабного развития альтернативной энергетики. Согласно экспертным оценкам, возможности использования возобновляемых источников энергии у нас в стране приравнивается к эквиваленту 51 миллиардов тонн нефти. Существующие на сегодня технологии позволяют получать энергию, эквивалентную 179 миллионов тонн нефти, что почти в 3 раза превышает объем добываемого в республике топлива, а также предотвратить выбросы 447 миллионов тонн углекислого газа, сернистых соединений, оксида азота и других загрязняющих веществ. В целях создания правовых основ, системного закрепления приоритетных направлений и комплекса мер государственной политики в области использования возобновляемых источников энергии, повышения энергоэффективности в отраслях экономики, социальной сфере и уровня диверсификации топливно-энергетического баланса, финансового стимулирования производителей возобновляемых источников энергии, а также укрепление энергетической безопасности страны, в 2019 году был принят закон Республики Узбекистан об использовании возобновляемых источников энергии. Одним из важных аспектов перехода Узбекистана к зеленой экономике является также развитие экологически чистого транспорта. В структуре транспортных средств, используемых в республике, доминирует автомобильный, общее количество которого составляет более чем 2 миллиона 700 тысяч единиц. Несмотря на относительную эффективность и экономичность автотранспорт, второй крупный потребитель энергоресурсов и наряду с сектором промышленности является одним из главных загрязнителей окружающей среды. В целом, доля эмиссий загрязняющих веществ в атмосферу от транспортных средств в настоящее время в стране достигает примерно 65%, а в крупных городах, таких как Ташкент, превышает даже 80%. При этом ежегодный объем выбросов загрязняющих веществ за счет использования бензина и дистоплива в автотранспорте составляет более чем 1,5 миллиона тонн в год. На наш взгляд, одним из эффективных и экологически безупречных является переход двигателей внутреннего сгорания на криогенное водородное или бензинно-водородное композитное топливо. Во многих странах мира занимается разработкой технологий по переходу на водородное топливо. но, к сожалению, это разрознено. В то же время преимущества водорода как топлива связаны не только с тем, что при его сгорании образуется экологически чистый водяной пар, но и с тем, что по сравнению с органическим топливом, то есть углеводородным топливом, он обладает большим запасом энергии. При сгорании тонны водорода выделяется столько же тепла, сколько при сгорании 3,5 тонны органического топлива. Прежде чем посмотреть на вечное, как говорится, топливо, надо посмотреть на Солнце. Солнце основывается на водороде. Звезды все основываются на водороде. Особую роль в процессе перехода Узбекистана к зеленой экономике играет образование и наука. В мае 2019 года правительством нашей страны утверждена концепция по развитию экологического образования в Республике Узбекистан, которая предусматривает поэтапное внедрение системы непрерывного экологического образования и воспитания на всех этапах обучения. Это требует дальнейшего совершенствования государственных стандартов, развития научного потенциала республики, пересмотра учебного процесса и системы повышения квалификации для подготовки кадров по соответствующим специальностям, а также подготовки и издания учебно-методических пособий, учебников, наглядных и дидактических материалов для образовательных учреждений дошкольного, общего, среднего, среднеспециального, профессионального и высшего образования. Таким образом, переход к устойчивой, более экологической, чистой зеленой экономике окажет влияние также на рынок труда, создавая дополнительные рабочие места и повышая качество имеющихся рабочих мест в сельском хозяйстве, перерабатывающих отраслях, строительной индустрии и в других сферах. Благодарю за внимание.
Katta rahmat. Mana hozirgi demak mavzudan shu narsani amin bo'layapmizki, qanchalik bu yashil iqtisodiyotga o'tish muhim va bu faqatgina bu O'zbekiston emas, butun dunyo uchun va busiz kelajakdagi yana davom etadigan taraqqiyotimiz faqatgina o'sha sayyoramizga zarar yetkazish yoki bo'lmasa o'sha zararni oshirish bilan bog'liq bo'lib qoladi. Va mana shu yerda bizning mana shu konferensiyamizning birinchi qismini tugatamiz va shu borada mana Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotining taraqqiyot dasturi tomonidan tayyorlangan bitta videoni tomosha qilamiz. Bu videoda asosan mana shu Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotining shu yer sayyoramizni tinchlik elchilari tomonidan yo'llangan shu o'zlarini tilaklarini ko'rib o'tamiz. Rahmat.
Throughout time, the planet has shaped all life.
The planet has shaped all life.
The planet has shaped all life.
But now, in the era of the human, we are shaping the planet.
And truthfully, we are not doing a good job at it yet. Our actions are putting a lot of pressure on the world. Just look at 2020 with COVID-19, extreme weather, and rampant wildfires. People have created this mess, but we can fix it.
Empowered people can become agents of their own destiny. The world may seem stuck in its own ways, but we can take actions to create a new normal, whether that's expanding the role of women in society or using cleaner energy.
In too many countries, fossil fuels remain the primary source of energy, but clean alternatives like solar power will help reduce our carbon emissions. These alternatives need to be made accessible and affordable without using too much of other finite resources.
And we must learn to harness the power of nature at the same time as we protect its beauty and wonder. Moving to protect, sustainably manage, and restore ecosystems in a way that promotes well-being.
Too often, the decisions of a few people or countries hurt the most vulnerable people across the world. For all of us to flourish now and into the future, we must understand that we are all connected. The choices you make impact the whole world around you.
Shaping the planet means
taking bold steps.
Bold steps for humans to survive and thrive in this new era.
If we are going to change the world,
we need you.
We need you.
We need you, our global leaders, to take bold action now.
Demak, bugungi konferensiyamizning ikkinchi qismiga o'tamiz. Aytib o'tganimizdek, insoniyatning keyingi taraqqiyoti demak yangi normallikka o'tishni talab qiladi va bu normallikka o'tish yangi bir motivatsion tizimlarni, yangi davlat siyosatini talab qiladi va mana shu sohalarda hozir biz O'zbekiston Respublikasini o'sha Moliya vazirligi qoshidagi fiskal demak tadqiqotlar institutining direktori Jahongir Nigmatovga beramiz va mana shu sohada olib borilayotgan tadqiqotlar natijalari bilan tanishamiz. Marhamat.
Assalomu alaykum, Sodiq Salixovich, Dimovska xonim, rais, hurmatli xonimlar va janoblar. Bugungi tadbirga taklif qilganinglar uchun kattakon rahmat. Albatta biz ham bu sohada qilgan bir qator ishlarimiz bor. Shulardan birini bugun sizlarning e'tiboringizga havola etmoqchimiz. Albatta bu tadqiqot nuqtai nazaridan gapirilgani uchun har xil munozaralarga sabab bo'lishi mumkin. Lekin bundan ajablanmang, biz ham ajablanmaymiz. Bu hammasi bugungi kunda hukumatimiz tomonidan qabul qilinayotgan qarorlarni qabul qilishda yordam berib qolsa ajab emas. Ma'ruzamni prezentatsiyamni ingliz tilida tayyorlaganim bois, xuddi oldinroq Odilbek Isakov aytib o'tganlaridek, ingliz tilida tayyorlaganim bois, terminologiya ham boshqa har xil tushunish bo'lmasligi uchun ingliz tilida qilishga ruxsat berasiz. So this is the content of my presentation today. So the first part, in fact, has been already been said by many of the speakers before. Particularly, Ben Slay said a lot about the methodology of how Human Development Index is measured. Human Development Index is, in fact, a number, is a result that gives us, which is the outcome of all the policy measures that we do, that the government does. So in the beginning of the previous slide, please, the previous one. Yeah, so I'll not talk much about the first one. I'll mostly talk about the second part and the third part. So these two, so as not to take too much of your time, and conclusions will be followed by within when we talk about point 2 and point 3. Yeah, let's go next. In the beginning of our conference, the first chairman of Senate, Dr. Safoyev, said that we have chosen the human development as the priority measure. We have chosen the Human Development Index as the priority index. So in today's presentation, I just wanted to reiterate or show why it should be true based on evidence, based on the figures and data which are available open publicly worldwide. Next slide, please. Because the components of human development, of why it is, how it's measured, and all the stuff was discussed a little earlier. So I'll skip these next slides too. Next one, Diora, next one. Yeah. So importantly, when we talk about methodology, 3 parts are measured. So the first one is long and healthy life, which is measured by life expectancy at birth. And the next one is education, knowledge, and the third one is living standard. So next one, please. Next. Because this was already discussed, I don't want to take your time on that. Next one. And the next one. So one probably particular interest could be the relationship of HDI, Human Development Index, with the rest of other indices. So you see in the first graph, which is top left, HDI and corruption level, and the vertical axis is measured by corruption perceptions index. So you see the relationship is negative. With higher human development, we'll have lower corruption. So this should not be a surprise, an expected result. If you look at the next graph, which is to the right of it, so rule of law and human development index, so you see there's a positive relationship. So with better human development, we should expect a better legislation, better rules of the game, which are set by the government. The third one is doing business is probably one of the most pronounced indices, indices of the past, not only in our country, but in our neighboring countries. Everybody, I would observe, would see doing business as a most important indicator. But we just wanted to show it is true, but at the same time, it's not, because we have Human Development Index, as we will see a little later. So budget transparency is one of the core functions of Ministry of Finance. So with higher human development, we should expect a higher or more transparent budget. The next one. So although many of the previous speakers have said about lots of measures that are being taken by the government to improve the well-being of a nation, of our people, but the truth will come when we compare it with the rest of the countries. So next one. So these are the figures which are based on the Human Development Report 2020. So what I want to tell you here is the first component, which is health. So Uzbekistan scores quite low. I mean, with the last one, low, maybe a little higher than Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, but it's low not only because here it's like that. It's probably low because we haven't worked well with international organizations that collects data for Human Development Index. Next one. So that's in education sector. You see we score somewhat lower. Next one. And this is something that is very composite, which is probably promoted by our economists. This GNI per capita, and by GNI per capita we score based on PPP 2017 PPP in 2017 prices quite low. Let me go next. So this is how we started in 1990s and how this HDI developed over time. So what we can see here, we frequently compare ourselves to our neighboring countries, namely Kazakhstan, but we should be honest with ourselves that Kazakhstan at that time, Belarus, Ukraine, Armenia, Azerbaijan, all these countries started at a high level than us. So that today that they have a higher result than us should not be a surprise, because they started in the 1990s with better conditions. So with Uzbekistan, as you can see, for 1990s data is not available, but from 2000s you'll see the index has been increasing, but that increase is a result of all the policies that are undertaken by the government. And as you can see, in other countries, we see the same, almost the same rate of growth. So there is nothing, in fact, that we can be very boastful of what we are doing yet. Next one. This is the dynamics of HDI in CIS countries. So the red one is Uzbekistan, as you can see. And then in 2015, that red line crosses another line. It is the year in which Uzbekistan moved from low human development index to higher one. And the reason behind that was all these years, especially for the last 4 years, the education component of Human Development Index has increased. We have enrolled more students to tertiary higher education. As a result, of mean years of schooling has increased. And also as was mentioned by my colleague, Mr. Ilham Ibrahimovic, the intake into kindergartens has increased twice for the last 4 years. Yeah, let me go next. So here is one interesting moment that I would like to pay your attention to, is that life expectancy at birth for Uzbekistan is 71.7. As you can see, it's not that very low, but actually this should be an estimate. To our best guess, official data shows that the life expectancy at birth of Uzbekistan is 75, at the level of 75. But when calculating HDI, they took 71.7, which is lower than we should. As a result, we have HDI standing lower than we should. Now, of course, this is not a fault of, for example, WHO, World Health Organization, who collects the data, but this is an estimate. So that means it's a signal to our policymakers to work better with international organizations in data sharing stuff. And if you also look at the GNI per capita, and if you compare it with the Kazakhstan, which is 3 times lower in PPP terms, that should not be a surprise because in 1990s, we started at the lower conditions, even for every of these indicators. Yeah, next one. The next question is, Mr. Uzbekistan mentioned about 24 priority ratings. And the question that we would like to ask is, out of these 24, which ones should be most powerful? Most powerful in the sense that when we have a new policy that improves one component of some rating, and that improvement is normally reflected in the component's further ratings. So that means if you improve one rating, then other rating or index should also improve. We measure these sort of associations and calculated which rating has the highest highest association, highest strength. So meaning if you improve one rating, how well it will improve the rest of the other ratings that government is pursuing. Please go next. This was very well described by my colleague, Mr. Odilbek Isakov, 24 international ratings. And of course, I called it National Council. Probably the better one should be Republican Council. Next one, please. This is the current standing. That's the current standing of Uzbekistan international ratings and indices. Number 10 is Human Development Index. So 106 place out of 209 countries. That's 2020 report. And go next. So this is the methodology of how we measured it. As I told a little earlier, we calculated the cross correlations both across time and countries. So countries are limited to CIS countries, and then calculated these correlations, took their absolute values and took the sum. The problem that we have come up with that is Uzbekistan's data or data pertaining to Uzbekistan in the past, like 2010, 2011, for many years, the data was missing. So we had to exclude those observations which are missing. And when we have a country which has missing data, then that country was also excluded. As a result, our CIS is shrunk to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So several countries of Commonwealth of Independent States. I'll go next. So this is what we did, and these are the results. There are too many figures, but what we can conclude is you see every cell in this table is colored. So the red one is the one which has the weakest association with other ratings, and the green one is the one which has strong association or strong correlation with other ratings. So as you can see, many of our economists, especially economists even outside of our country, our people, they tend to concentrate on rule of law. So if you look at the rule of law, it is also very much powerful. So depending on the country, for example, in Armenia, the association was, the strength, the power of the rating was so-so. But if you look, for example, in the Ukraine, rule of law, for example, had very low power in explaining the improvement of other ratings. So if you look at the Human Development Index, it's all green, it's almost green. And this should be an indication that HDI is probably one of the strongest ratings or figures in the CIS. You can also look at other figures like doing business, which is quite pronounced in many countries. So doing business is really great, and it has lots of yellow cells, green cells. But even with that, depending on the country, for example, in Georgia, it's not as much powerful as it is, for example, in Tajikistan or Moldova. Let me go next. To get away of these figures, we have made the same thing over years. So what we can see here is Human Development Index, which is in red. So you can see it's standing. 7, for example, represents out of many ratings that we have been pursuing. Out of these 24, we took the one which are available. And if we take the ones which are available, out of them, the ranking of Human Development Index was 7 in 2010. So if we move further up until 2018, so we see that Human Development Index standing has improved. And to the right of the table, you see all those trends. So rule of law, for example, has been very much important, very much powerful from 2010 through probably 2013. It was #1 rating in all these countries, in all these countries, in the CIS countries. And, but if you look at its trend, after that, it's going down, up. The down-ups are very much common to rule of law index. So that means its strength of association should also be lower. If we look at the Human Development Index, if you look at the trend, it's increasing, steadily increasing. And who could be that much boastful, like Human Development Index, is doing business, which also has a steady trend. So you see doing business, that's probably 4th rating from the top. From 2015, it was the most important rating, the most important in the sense that affects the other ratings. Over years, so doing business shows almost the same strength as Human Development Index. Let me go next. So if we do the same thing with the countries and take top 7 ratings, these are selected countries. We have seen a little more countries than that. But what is important is in Georgia, Human Development Index, which is the development of, Human Development Index, is #4, scores #4 for all these years. If you look at the Kazakhstan, it's #2. In Russia, it's also that high. If you look at Kyrgyzstan, which is probably a surprising result, Human Development Index is the most powerful rating in Kyrgyzstan and other countries. So, and then what we did is we combined all these ratings and took the one which Human Development Index is in the top in all these countries, in fact. Let me go next. So if we combine all these tables, I'll come up with this. So that's our final result with AGI, which should be the most powerful, more powerful than, for example, doing business. If you take the average for all these countries under consideration from 2010 to and 2018. So Human Development Index scores 9, has a frequency in all these countries, which is higher than doing business. So what I mean is maybe doing business was powerful in one country, but was not powerful in the other country. Human Development Index was not first probably in the early years, but it affected the improvement in other ratings overall on the average. So this is the result that I wanted to deliver to your attention. Let's go next. In fact, Human Development Index is in fact by our new mechanism, as was described by Mr. Uzbekistan, belongs to the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Special Education. They are doing lots of good job in improving that. Next. In fact, what I also wanted to tell you is Human Development Index has the most highest number of responsible ministries and agencies to work with. Let's go next. There are some of the things that I do not want to repeat what I said a little earlier, but the most important thing is statistics. So to the extent that the government and civil servants work better with international organizations in data sharing, we should stand better than we are in HDI. And also international comparison program of the World Bank for PPP calculations. My colleague from the Ministry of Economy said from 2021, we are already there. Uzbekistan's government of Uzbekistan is already attending there. Next one. Thank you for your attention. This is all I wanted to deliver to your attention. Should you have any questions, I'll be glad to reply.
Katta rahmat, Jahongir. Albatta hozir siz mana shu bir nima deydi to'liq o'zingizni tadqiqotlaringiz bilan ko'rsatib o'tdingiz. Mana shu inson taraqqiyot indeksi qanchalik muhimligini. Har bir taraqqiyot borki, taraqqiyot eng muhim qismlaridan bittasi bu ta'lim. Ta'lim o'zingizlar hammalaring bilasizlar, demak tashqi ta'siri bor, demak kuch sifatida nafaqat faqatgina davlat yoki bu xususiy ta'lim tizimlari ham shakllanishi kerak va oxirgi 4 yilda O'zbekistonda mana shu xususiy ta'lim institutlarini shakllanishi va uni o'sha inson taraqqiyotidagi ta'siri demak sezilarli darajada desak xato bo'lmaymiz va bugun mana shu davlat emas, mana shu xususiy sektor tomonidan o'sha ta'lim xizmatlarini demak ko'rsatish va uni nima deydi inson taraqqiyotiga bo'lgan ta'sirini oshirish bo'yicha bir fikr mulohazalar haqida o'sha xususiy sektorda O'zbekiston Respublikasi shu nima deydi ko'p tanilgan Xan akademiyasining asoschilaridan bittasi Botir Arifjonovga so'z beramiz. Marhamat.
Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli anjuman qatnashchilari. Ushbu anjumanda O'zbekistonga bo'lmaganligim sababli umuman qatnashish imkoniyatini yaratib berganingiz uchun o'z minnatdorchiligimni bildirmoqchiman. Anjuman qatnashchilarining asosiy qismi ingliz tilida gapirishgani sababli prezentatsiyamni qolganini ingliz tilida davom ettirishga ruxsat bersangiz. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'd like to talk about the contribution of private sector in a public education using the EdTech. So of course, last year, 2020 was a very difficult year, very unusual year, and especially this touched very badly the education. You can see one of the primary trends that online education is booming. And this chart, which I'm presenting now, is showing that, for example, in 2019, the famous Coursera course had a total new registers about 8 million. This number almost more than doubled in 2020 and increased to continuing to increase in 2021 as well. During today's presentation, I've heard about many things regarding the development sphere of the education, how much spent is on education is going. So I'd like to give you a few ideas about how much is it being spent and how effective it is. So this slide is showing that for the past decade, the investment and expenditure in education is increasing, which is very good factor. But one thing we have to understand that the spending doesn't always mean the efficient spending. Out of this total spending, currently only 4% is being spent on EdTech. So basically, what we're seeing is that only 4% of total spend is used in an effective manner using the new technologies. If we especially can consider that education currently in most part of the education system, especially universities and schools and other places, is not very much being developed. Considering the new technology giving them more opportunity how to do this in a better way. But there is a good trend that the spending on EdTech is increasing. So for the next 5 years, there is expectation that the spending will increase. So it will going to be almost double. Now let's talk about Uzbekistan. For those who doesn't know, or maybe who know, just like to refresh the statistics, with a country of 33 million population, with close to 10,000 schools in the country, and about 4.8 million people going to our schools. And about 2 years ago, we started being involved in a project which is called Han Academy, which is an international project allowing the people to access the education free, always and everywhere. So currently, this platform is being utilized in 190 countries, translated in 29 languages. The Uzbek language became 29th language. Currently, it has more than 15 million active users online using the platform, more than 10,000 free micro lectures, and 25 different subjects which is covered in the platform. And why the platform is so important and how it's helping the education process. Though I'm not going to go too much into details considering the short period of time we have for the presentation. Just quick snapshots of the features is that platform is equipped with a machine learning mechanism provided by Google. So it allows every user when it goes to the platform to have its individual profile, and machine learning technology allows this profile to be updated based on how each and every student is performing in the platform. So anytime your student or your kid is solving any example or watching any video in a platform, the machine learning tries to understand what he's doing, how successful he is in answering the question, and tries to provide the next question based on his results. based on which the whole platform is becoming too much personalized. So that allows people with any disabilities or any potential lack of attention, or those who want to increase the knowledge on a more faster manner than their classmates, to move forward, not waiting for others. Another aspect of the platform is it's a mastery base. What it means is that consider simply the education as a process of building the house. So imagine you build the first level for 80%, which is in converting to the exam result is, let's say, 80% of your total score. So you say, okay, fine, you passed, you move to the next level, you conclude the next level 80%, third level 80%, etc. Once 10-story building is finished, every level is 80%, you can imagine how shaky the total building is going to be. But the problem is we never know which 20% is missing in our knowledge. And that's very challenging task for teachers and overall education system to find what is missing. But since the platform is technology-based, it allows to spot those blank parts of the knowledge and direct the student in a way so that he can fill all the possible spots in all the subjects he's taking through the platform. Another thing is that the platform allows the education process in a form of the flipped class. So the contemporary, like old system, when we have a teacher as the only person who is communicating the knowledge in the class and saying all the important things in the class, and others passively listening, is going and fading out. So because the technology provides better way and more personalized way to get educated through the platform, there is no more need for a teacher to conduct the lectures. So the teacher is changing his role from the lecturer to the person or to the tutor who is trying to help the student to find the red spots in the education. So this chart shows this panel of the teacher, where the teacher can see which student is missing which part of his subject. And when the student comes to the class, he doesn't need to repeat whole subject, but just can concentrate on particular problems each and every student is facing. Another important part of education is encouragement, because students need encouragement when they have a success, when they have even failure, so they move ahead. The platform have the feature like providing some, using some gamification, providing some tools for encouragement. And of course, very important part of the platform, it has a very deep statistics. You can see how much time the student is spending on a platform, which subjects he's performing good, where he's having difficulties, which exactly topics of any subject he's having most difficulty, and why. Okay, so there are plenty of subjects in Khan Academy, so about 25 as we mentioned. While we started translating and localizing Khan Academy platform into Uzbek, we try to limit ourselves to the STEM subjects because, as you know, like non-STEM subjects seems to have its own way of interpretation in different languages. So we said like, let's stick to the STEM subjects, which is not different from country to country. So it includes like physics, math, biology, economics, programming, astronomy, medicine, etc. I have a good news that this month, we almost finished 99% of all of these platforms being translated into Uzbek language. And I'll give a little bit more details on this at a later stage. But before going into that statistics, I would like to remind you that Uzbek language is not only about Uzbekistan. We have about more than 5 million population of Uzbek speaking people living outside in our neighboring countries. And also plus 1 or 2 million population living in the far abroad, including Europe, US, and other parts, Middle East, East Asia, and other parts of the world as well. So this platform, when we create this in Uzbek language, when we put this online and we allow all the people speaking Uzbek around the world to use this platform to utilize to get proper education in Uzbek language. So what we have done so far. So within 18 months, the team of 80 people, this is mostly the translators, we managed to translate about 7 million words. So for the record, in the history of Han Academy, we are the 29th language, and we have been recorded as the country which achieved the localization of the platform in a language in a shortest period of time. Apart from that, the platform consists not only from the text, but also from the video. So we have managed to create 3,200 videos. I would like to stress on why we say create is there is a specific feature of Uzbek language. Uzbek language is usually longer than English. So when we tried to subtitle or to dub or to translate for English videos, we couldn't manage it. And everybody suggested us like we had used the experience of neighboring countries, like not neighboring, like similar language countries like Turkey or Azerbaijan, and we have seen what has been done in Georgia and other places, and they have all created the videos from the scratch, and we took the same path. Of course, it's a little bit more expensive, longer period, but the content allows us to get the max out of this platform. So the platform to implement this project, initially I started as a charity from my own funds. The idea came from my wife who inspired me, and we started working on this project together. But very soon I have realized that I cannot continue this just from my own resources, although I'm in a private business. So we decided to launch first a crowdfunding initiative in Uzbekistan, and we tried to attract all the possible donors in the country and abroad. And I would like to mention here the huge support we've seen from the EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, especially Kamola Mahmudova, who helped us to raise first the fund of 50,000 euros. And afterwards, we managed to attract all the other different donors, including the United States Embassy, the Digital Trust, all the big commercial entities in Uzbekistan, including Artel, UMS, Knopf, and others. So the first phase we have been planning to be completed about $500,000, but thanks to the lean implementation and the cost optimization, we managed to raise 350,000 in complete first stage for this amount of money. But this is not all what we have done. It's not everything. So we have translated the platform, and the platform is ready and being used by people. I will give you statistics afterwards, but it's not enough. So for the next stage, what we have to do is we have to move for the next to promoting the platform to the young population in Uzbekistan. So for that stage, we announced last month that we are launching the phase 2. And this is also the crowdfunding, and we announced this on the internet. First of the private entities who decided to sponsor our initiative was Artel, who is sponsoring this as a charity for $400,000. So now you say like, okay, so you have spent $350,000. So what did you achieve at the end? This is a very interesting statistic I would like to share with you. This chart shows, this is not prepared by us. This is actually a snapshot from the Google Analytics. And it shows that from during 1 year period, the total amount of people which used our platform was about 130,000 people. So I'd like to stress here that we have spent money which is equal to the renovation of small village school in Uzbekistan, or maybe building a very small school in the countryside. But we have achieved such a huge impact almost all over the country. And this is just the beginning, without any promotion, without any going into public yet. Soon, within a year or two, we're going to cover more than couple million students in our country. And most importantly, all of this platform is going to be free. And recently, we have come up with another initiative. We are approaching government to allow us to and help us to make access to this platform free using all possible internet channels for all parts of the population in all parts of Uzbekistan. So this is all my presentation. This is what I want to tell you, that it's not important how much you spend, but rather how you spend and how efficient the spending is. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Katta rahmat sizga, Bozor aka. Endi konferensiyamizning savollar qismiga o'tamiz. Bizda hozir mana bu onlayn translyatsiya bo'lyapti va bizga hozir mana ikkita savol kelib tushgan. Demak, bu ikkala savol ham Oliy Majlis Senatining Xotin-qizlar va gender tenglik masalalari qo'mitasi a'zosi Abira Husaynovadan kelib tushgan. Demak, birinchi savol Ben Slayga. Ben Slay, the question is that the humanity is waging the war against the nature. So what you see that, the fastest way of, the quitting from this war? Ben, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. The humanity's war against nature is clearly unintentional. It's a reflection of unsustainable natural resource use, especially with regards to the global commons, such as biodiversity, such as the atmosphere's ability to absorb greenhouse gas emissions. And what is needed is greater consciousness, greater understanding of what specific practices cause the greatest harm to the global commons, to the environment, and what are the lowest cost and highest returns answers to those problems. And here, the Human Development Report emphasizes social norms and values, regulations and incentives, and calls attention in particular to investments that create jobs and strengthen natural capital, as well as protect the natural environment. So investments in sustainable forestry, investments in better municipal waste management, investments in sustainable agriculture, investments in energy and water efficiency. These are all examples of economic activities which can be profitable, can generate income, and generate employment while strengthening the natural environment rather than making war upon it. This, I think, is the challenge that we face in changing this unfortunate dynamic of humanity being at opposition with our natural environment. Katta rahmat.
Thank you very much. İkinci savolimiz demak Ilhom aka Norqulovga, kambag'allikni qisqartirish darajasiga e'tibor qaratish bo'yicha mamlakatimizda ulkan islohotlar amalga oshirilmoqda. Bu sohada strategik maqsadlarimizga erishish qancha vaqtni qamrab olish mumkinligini prognozlar asosida ayta olasizmi? Albatta turli ta'sirlar, omillarni hisobga olgan holda. Marhamat.
Rahmat savol uchun. Bilasizmi, kambag'allikni masalan ma'lum bir muddatdan keyin qisqartiramiz, ma'lum bir davrga kelib nima deydi, bir yo'q qilamiz degan savolga javob berish qiyin. Qaysi ma'nodaki, birinchidan bu bir nisbiy tushuncha bo'lib hisoblanadi. Kambag'allik bu hamma davlatda bor, даже Amerika Qo'shma Shtatlarida ham bor. Bu birinchidan. Ikkinchidan, masalan Xitoy tajribasiga qaraydigan bo'lsak, bu Xitoy dunyoda bu eng nima deydi, muvaffaqiyat qozongan mamlakatlardan biri bo'lib hisoblanadi. 30-40 yil demak kerak bo'ldi. Bu kambag'allikni endi absolyut kambag'allikni yo'q qilish bo'yicha mana yaqinda o'zlaringiz ham yangiliklarda eshitdingizlar. Endi buni bir qanaqadir strategik maqsad haqida gapiradigan bo'lsak, albatta bu borada maqsadlarimiz mavjud. Ya'ni biza hozir asosiy maqsadlarimizdan biri bu eng asosiy bu konseptual bu yondashuv bu 2030-yilgacha bo'lgan O'zbekistonni ijtimoiy-iqtisodiy rivojlantirish konsepsiyasi bo'lib hisoblanadi. Bu yerda asosiy ko'rsatkich bu demak O'zbekistonni o'rta daromadli mamlakatlarni yuqori guruhiga olib chiqish. Aholi jon boshiga daromad bo'yicha hisoblaydigan bo'lsak, demak bu shu yuqori hozir biza quyi bosqichda hisoblanadigan bo'lsak, bu yuqori guruhiga olib chiqish. Endi savol ko'proq haligi bir texnik xarakterga ega bo'lgani uchun mana qisqacha bir texnik yondashuv qilaman. Bu qanaqa hisoblanadi? Bu demak maqsadni qo'ygandan keyin biz pastga qarab uni hisob kitobini qilib, buni qaysi yo'l bilan amalga oshirishimiz mumkin. Bu masalan o'sha guruhga olib chiqishimiz uchun biz 30-yilga borib taxminan 150-160 milliard dollargacha chiqarishimizga to'g'ri kelishi mumkin. Yalpi ichki mahsulotda bu degani demak yiliga kamida 7-8% o'sishni talab qiladi. Bu yalpi ichki mahsulot. Yalpi ichki mahsulotda demak biza tarkiban ko'rib chiqadigan bo'lsak, buni asosiy qismi sanoatga to'g'ri keladi, qishloq xo'jaligi va xizmatlar. Bitta sanoatni o'zini agar olib qaraydigan bo'lsak, mana shu bizning strategiyamizda tayyorlayotganimizda buni ichida ham mana asosiy tarmoqlar bir 40% yoki 50% o'zini o'sish rezervlarini, demak zaxiralarini tugallatib bo'lgan. Bu o'sha kon neft gaz sohasi yoki kon metallurgiya sohasi deyishimiz mumkin, yoki ko'pgina ba'zi tarmoqlarimiz bor. Demak buni ma'nosi shunday bo'ladiki, yangi sohalarni ko'proq rivojlantirishimiz kerak, qo'shilgan qiymat bo'ladigan sohalar. Va bizning tahlillarimiz mana shu xorijiy ekspertlar bilan ishlayotganimizda shuni ko'rsatyaptiki, biz o'sha haligi buni equipment manufacturing deydi. Endi faqatgina tayyor mahsulot emas, balki kichkina oddiy texnologiyalarni ishlab chiqarishga ham o'tishimizga to'g'ri keladi. Bu mana bitta misol. Buni qilishimiz uchun nima kerak bo'ladi? Albatta buni tagida tarkibiy islohotlar turibdi. Mana bu maqsaddan, strategik maqsaddan pastga qarab ketyapti. Bu faqatgina iqtisodiy tarafda. Endi yuqorida demak buni iqtisodiy o'sishni inkluzivligini ta'minlashimiz kerak. Inkluzivlik degani, ya'ni bu iqtisodiy o'sish hamma aholini barcha qatlamini birdek qamrab olish kerak yoki bir xil manfaat keltirish kerak. Bu borada mana yuqorida yaxshi fikrlarni aytib o'tildi. Mana o'zimiz ham aytdik, bu ta'limdir, lekin ta'lim bilan sifatli ta'lim bilan qamrab olish degan narsani bir og'izda aytib ketish mumkin, lekin buni sifatini qanday qilib oshiramiz? Bu sohada o'zida bitta katta strategiya. Bu katta, chunki bu o'qituvchilarni tayyorlash, bunga bir kun vaqt kerak bo'lmaydi, 2-3 yil ham vaqt kamlik qilish mumkin. Yillab vaqt kerak bo'ladi. Shundan kelib chiqib aytishimiz kerakki, bu nima deydi, aholini demak umuman mamlakatda kambag'allik darajasini pasaytirish uchun bunga yillab vaqt kerak bo'ladi. Sezilarli bir natijaga erishish uchun va bu boradagi ishlar biz boshlaganmiz. Bu tizimli va kompleks chora-tadbirlarni o'z ichiga oladi va buni nima deydi, natijasiga erishish bitta yo'nalishdagi ish bilan bog'liq emas. Bu demak hammasi bir-biri bilan bog'liq va bir-biriga turtki berib nima deydi, turtki beradigan ishlar bo'lib hisoblanadi. Yana bitta narsani aytishim kerakki, men boshida aytdim, bu kambag'allik bu bir nisbiy tushuncha. Mana misol uchun hozirgi kecha kunduzda agar bir ikki xil, uch xil yondashuv taklif qilinyapti, vaqt o'tishi bilan har bitta jamiyatda, har bitta davlatda aytaylik o'sha kambag'allik mezoni ham har xil bo'ladi. Ba'zi bir davlatlarda aytaylik, qo'pol qilib aytganda, agar telefonga dostupi bo'lmasa, masalan telefon sotib olishga yoki birorta bir haligi nima deydi, bir joyga sayohat qilishga yoki bir imkoniyat bo'lmasa, bu ham haligi kambag'al deb hisoblanishi mumkin. Hamma davlatda iqtisodiy holatdan kelib chiqib, demak har xil kriteriyalar qo'llaniladi va bu nisbiy tushuncha. Javobga demak yana xulosa qilib aytadigan bo'lsak, bunga demak strategik maqsadlarimiz bor. Bu uchun o'sha konseptual hujjat o'sha 2030-yilgacha bo'lgan sotsial ijtimoiy iqtisodiy rivojlanish va uni bazasida qabul qilingan alohida strategik hujjatlar bo'lib hisoblanadi. Rahmat.
Rahmat, kattadan katta Ilhom aka. Albatta, mana masalan aytaylik, kambag'allikni qisqartirish bo'yicha dunyo bo'yicha eng masalan aytaylik o'sha namuna deb aytadigan bo'lsak, o'sha Xitoy tajribasini 80-yillardan boshlangan bo'lsa, mana 2021-yilga kelib absolyut kambag'allik faqatgina tugatilyapti. Demak, 40 yildan ortiq ular kurashildi va bu eng namunali dasturlardan biri hisoblanadi. Shu bilan mana shu bugungi konferensiyamiz doirasida qamrab olinadigan barcha dokladlarni eshitdik va eng oxirgi o'sha konferensiyamizning xulosa so'zini demak O'zbekiston Respublikasidagi Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkilotining taraqqiyot dasturini demak rahbariga Matilda Dimovskaga beramiz.
Rahmat, and I think I have a rather difficult job if I am to summarize, because my view is that we had an extremely rich discussion. It was an extremely good launch of the report. I have to say, me personally, I'm very impressed with the level of understanding and the commitment to human development of Uzbekistan, of all participants here. What we have heard, but also we spoke rather visionary statements and direction. So I think I will not be summarizing. It's not very easy, that one, but I will come with only a few points. Now, I think it was important that we hear the arguments and of the Human Development Report and the call about the need to reframe the human development journey, so to break this vicious cycle of social and planetary imbalance, a cycle that threatens on a long term the humanity as well. We have, what Pedro was saying, if we have power to change the planet, which apparently we do have, we also have a power to change our choices, our policies, our individual behavior. The report came, we've heard, with the 3 broad recommendations of what can be done around that. Norms, incentives, solutions, that was the message. But then how that relates to us in Uzbekistan. We have discussed Uzbekistan recorded showed in 2019 slow, but shows a consistent trend of improvement in the Human Development Index, and that's extremely important. It fares relatively well in terms of its pressure on the planet. The question is how it will address the growing threats of the destabilized ecosystems in the future, with all development ambition that Uzbekistan rightly has. It was also great to hear the government's commitment to further advance the human development, not only in words, but also in a very specific KPIs, if I may say, and a clear target of reaching the level of very high human development status by 2030, in a very, very short period of time. We've heard about the readiness, and not only readiness, but the action to invest much more in human development, SDG-related investments to be made to help ultimately the ordinary people for their life, and to do that in a much more transparent manner, but also to develop new policies to reduce the pressure on the planet. And it was great to hear very specific recommendations of sectors in which that can be done: agriculture, water, energy, waste management, but also the huge renewable potential of the country of Uzbekistan that we have. Now, I think what I can finish also is to again reconfirm readiness of UNDP to accompany Uzbekistan in all of these policies, and to think of how together we can bring even more about the human development discussions around the sustainable development goals to Uzbekistan, and how to make it even more practically useful at this stage. Let me thank to the organizers, to the Senate, to Mr. Sadiq Safoyev, the Senator Safoyev, for pulling it, to the Ministry of Economy and Poverty Reduction, the co-organizers, to the university for hosting us here, to Mr. Kahimov for moderating it so well, and to all of us, all participants and attendees. I missed many to mention. Of course, my colleagues from New York that woke up very early to join us. So let me finish by big thanks. This is a first and not first, but a discussion to continue. And I finish with saying Navruz Mubarak Bolsun to everyone.
Rahmat. Hammalaringizga kattadan katta rahmat. Kelajakda faqatgina o'sha inson taraqqiyot hisoboti emas, mana tez orada Matilda Dimovska, mana ustozlarimiz rahbarligida milliy o'sha inson taraqqiyot hisobotlarini ham mana shunday muhokama qilish hammamizga nasib qilsin.